Consciousness snaps back with a jolt. Now he's strapped into full armor, perched on a screaming warhorse, and the second he opens his eyes, he realizes they're already mounted and charging into the chaos. Back on the reins, they surge onto the unfamiliar cobblestones, gaze sharp, hearts loud, then a question hits them like a wave. Do we really? Wait, this is. A burning town lies beneath them, and the sight of that looming castle steals their breath. Too familiar, down to the last detail. So all they can whisper is one cursed acronym of recognition. The name means asterisk, echoes of eternity. Asterisk asterisk. A legend so famous people don't even say the full title anymore. They just call it a asterisk yo. This medieval fantasy RPG is legendary. Its epic tale of light versus darkness stretches across 2,000 years, and people are still raving about it 3 whole years after launch. The world is so packed with items and character classes that you could sink in thousands of hours and still feel like you haven't even scratched the surface. It's a burning town, straight out of EOE's prologue, where the protagonist crew rockets in to help as monsters rip the place apart, and the memory hits so hard it can't be mistaken, like the game burned itself into their head. But deep down, something's horribly, impossibly wrong. Realism hits like a truck. This isn't just the crumbling, burning buildings you can see. It's the crackling fire, the distant screams, and that gut-twisting feeling that everything is terrifyingly real. That chilling thought cuts through the noise. If this really is the world of IOE, then why are they staring at it from this angle? This sure as hell isn't how the game's protagonist sees it. They look down, and all they can see is the armored neck of their steed, with nobody ahead, no hero leading the charge. And then the horrifying truth starts to sink in, like their soldier snaps out loud, breaking the spiraling tension. "Captain, your orders." And the armored rider whips around, eyes blown wide with shock. That blonde beauty, of course they know her. Her name hits like a lightning strike. Natalia Norfolk asterisk, vice captain of the Holy Empire of Eterna's 3rd Special Forces Unit, a face they've stared at 1,000 times in the game. Then the soldier clocks the captain's frozen silence and panics. "Captain, who else could it be? Pull yourself together." "It's you." The shot snapped to chaos. No way this was real. He scrambled for answers, but the worst part hit harder. Somehow, he was now trapped inside the body of a man named Silva. You scramble for answers, clawing at your thoughts like, how in the world did all this even happen? In a flash of memory, it all slammed back, him leaving a convenience store after grabbing energy drinks, ready to start a new game, then seeing a woman about to get smashed by a truck and launching himself in front of her, taking the hit. The truth hit like a lightning bolt. He'd died back then and somehow been reincarnated. But the burning question followed. Why did he come back as Silva, not the game's real protagonist? He knew Silva Pierce like the back of his hand, captain of the Holy Empire of Eternia's 3rd Special Forces Unit and the kingdom's most feared knight. So at the start of the story, she was already a monster on paper. Cheat-tier stats and a stack of ridiculous, game-breaking skills. Then one massive problem hit, and it wrecked everything in its path. His thoughts got yanked to a stop when one of his soldiers screamed for orders, loud and urgent. He snapped back to the present, locked in and focused his mind. First things first, beat this prologue. Then he barked orders for everyone to wipe out the monsters terrorizing town and guard the survivors, swearing he'd hunt down the real source of the attack himself. His troops roared back in one voice, lifted that silver lance as if it could bless them, and scattered into action. Then he swallowed his shock and accepted the truth. This was his new job, and the game's story was already shouting one thing at him. The protagonist had to rescue the heroine, while his own mission was clear-cut. Hunt down and finish the boss behind the attack. Like his thoughts had yanked them from thin air, giant screeching bird monsters tore down into the town square. He snapped his horse forward on pure instinct, because one minute he was a peaceful gamer in the real world, and the next, he was staring down monstrous beasts with only one option left: fight or die. He slammed his weapon into the creature with brutal force, one clean swing, and it was erased on the spot, and then it hit him like lightning. The power he had was real, and it was terrifyingly immense. Incredible strength wasn't some secret skill at all. It was just a basic attack, straight from the game's rules. He remembered how other characters started at level 10, while Sylvapeer burst in at level 60, mowing down the puny prologue monsters as they flooded the area. And the scariest part, he wasn't just stronger, he was in a completely different world. With that massive gap in strength staring him in the face, he knew for sure the weaker creatures had zero chance of surviving. His focus snapped to the real cause of the invasion, a monstrous dimensional fault, a rift ripping through space and vomiting monsters into the world. He knew this was the Special Forces' #1 target. Smash it and you'd end the prologue. But seeing it this close, this painfully vivid, hit way harder than anything he'd ever watched on a screen. He tore through the chaos, hunting the key to its destruction, until his eyes locked onto the exact thing he needed. He understood the rule: shut a rift by crushing its guardian, the boss monster, and taking that thing down would lock in his place as the story's opening chapter hits its mark. Facing a beast bigger than him, he didn't even flinch. Strange confidence surged through his chest, and he was Silver now, living inside a body and mind forged by endless fights, with one unbeatable advantage. As a player, he held the ultimate knowledge, knowing exactly how terrifying this character really was. With a deafening roar tearing through the air, he charged straight at the beast, grinning like a man possessed as his weapon slammed into its tough hide. He unleashed the divine piercing strike, one brutal named technique that ripped right through the monster's defenses. The strike landed clean, and the massive beast jolted one last time before it crumpled to the ground, defeated. He loomed over it, breath steady, mission finished. He stood his ground on cracked earth, the fight already won, but his thoughts sprinted ahead, because one massive problem still sat there, waiting to be faced. That was the cruel fate he couldn't dodge. Because in the game's original story, at the end of Chapter 1, his Sylvapeer was marked to die. He throws himself in front to let the protagonist slip away from collapsing ruins, trapped in an unavoidable death event nobody had ever beaten. Even though dedicated fans begged for a DLC survival route, Silva's pleas fell on deaf ears, until the truth finally sank in. Everyone accepted his fate, and there was no way he was reaching Chapter 2. But once he embraced Silva, he would not let that truth sink in. He'd already died in the real world, and there was no way he was letting it happen again here. His resolve turned into steel, and right then the bespectacled subordinate bolted up to his side, frantic, asking if the captain was okay. He snapped his gaze upward, zeroing in on how the mission would end. Then he declared that the rift was sealed and demanded answers about what was happening on their side. Natalia Norfolk rushed back with the news. Every monster in town was wiped out, and they were herding survivors to safety. She even complimented him, calling his solo handling of the rift straight up incredible. Then another soldier confirmed the protagonist was safe too, and the nearby civilians finally exhaled in pure relief. Somewhere else, the player, now trapped in Silva's body, slumped at a desk, stuck in the 3rd Special Forces Unit HQ in the royal capital Aurora, completely clueless like, what am I even supposed to do? He fixed his gaze on the glowing, translucent screen in front of him, and no matter how real everything else felt, that interface screamed game. A scowl hid his face as he finally understood it. He'd hijacked Silva's character. On the screen, silver numbers flashed like a warning. Strength 281, Endurance 270, purely broken, cheat tier stats for this early stage. The kind of ridiculous power that usually gets a new, strong character erased before the story even warms up. He leaned back, eyes sharp as he chased the truth. Silva was watching, and maybe he was standing among the world's strongest. But he also knew he couldn't possibly survive that scripted death event by himself. He slumped back and froze. One twisted thought hit him hard. Should he bolt and escape everything? But that road was blocked from the start. According to the game's brutal, unbreakable rules, if you tried to run, someone had to pay by the end of Chapter 1. Either the protagonist or the heroine would die and the world would fall with them. He yanked at his hair in pure frustration, because with only 1 month left, this whole thing felt like a no-win death trap. Just as he sank into his thoughts, a calm voice cut in from the doorway, asking politely for a moment. He glanced up and saw Natalia standing there, sharp and smiling as she snapped a salute, then said she'd come to brief the follow-up procedure from their last mission. She started with the unidentified girl the Tangent unit rescued, and the instant he heard that, he knew this was the turning point of the original story. His mind sprinted through the plot twists, because the protagonist wasn't some random lead at all, it was Leia, the main heroine. Soon, she'd rip awake and break out of the barracks with Kyle and Mia hot on her heels. And the script made it clear. Silva wasn't even meant to show up again until the final event, so for now, all he could do was wait. As Natalia finished her report and asked if he had any worries, he snapped back into reality, because he couldn't just play along with the script. He needed a plan fast. He brushed her off, saying nothing stood out and that she'd done a great job. Natalia nodded and started to walk away. As he watched her walk away, a wild idea detonated in his head. Sure, Silva alone might not flip his fate, but maybe there was another door to open, and right then he snapped. Wait a minute. She halted at the doorway, spun back to his desk and shot him a look, then asked, "You got something? Tell me." Natalia stood at attention, ready to snap into action. "If it's important, just say it," she answered. He locked eyes with her, expression dead serious, and said, "Yeah, it's important." Then he paused like the words had weight and added, "But this isn't an order. I need a favor from you." Leaning in with that razor-sharp, twisted grin, he dropped his shocking demand, "Take your clothes off." Natalia froze, staring back in total disbelief, and all she could blurt out was one stunned, confused hot mess. She just freezes in shock, staring like she can't process what she heard, sweat slicking her face as she demands her captain repeat that crazy command, take off her clothes. Her shock snaps into iron duty mode. Sure, she still doubts why she has to strip, but if it's for the unit, she'll obey. Silva nods, then promises to lay out his reasons, step by step. He kicks things off by admitting, straight to her face, that he's always felt she'd fit a different role way better, while Natalia, still totally lost, blurts out what on earth a new role has to do with her getting undressed. His blunt explanation hit like a punch, and it shocked everyone, because her brand new job is to dance, plain and terrifying, and the word just hangs there while Natalia can only stare, stunned, unable to believe it. He leans in and admits she's nailed her job as a knight. Then he grins and declares, "Now watch her shine. She's stepping into the spotlight as a dancer." The world's chronicles even list the dancer as one of the classes that exists in the realm of EO. This support shaman class turns nature's raw power into ally buffs using dance steps and prayers. Most skills burn MP tied to your spirit stat, but the dancer class goes a different route and drinks HP instead. For Natalia, who's got the lowest spirit but amazing vitality, it's the perfect match, because it covers up her biggest weak spot. She stares him down and her face twists into pure horror and confusion. Then she blurts out, "Is this some kind of joke?" But his voice hits like a steel door closing, insisting he's deadly serious. Her face tightens with heartbreaking understanding and she asks, "So I'm no longer needed as a knight?" Before he can even answer, she slashes past his words, "If it's the captain's will, I'll follow it. You should have said that straight." Silva tries to argue, but then he realizes he's been completely, painfully misunderstood. She whips around to face him, her voice cracking with pure agony as she blurts that she idolized him, that she wanted to be just like him, so she followed him. Then she stares him down and says if he doesn't need her anymore, there's nothing left for her to live for, and she'll end her life right there on the spot. She yells at him to let her go, swearing she'll step outside and die if she's really useless. And Silva freezes, shocked that he missed it. Her spirit stat is so painfully low that she's basically one of the most mentally unstable people he's ever met. She snaps at him and asks if he wants her to ditch her sword and parade her body just because she can't live up to his idea of a knight. Silva slams back immediately, roaring that nobody said she was useless. He grabs the moment and insists he's pushing her to fight, because they need her strength, then swears an oath on the Silver Lance. When that name hits, she freezes. The Silver Lance is their unit's battle banner, swearing on it is a ritual so gripping it chains the whole team to one purpose, igniting them to rush into the fight with steel in their hearts. And yeah, it's basically brainwashing, wrapped in honor. After swearing that solemn vow, he begs her one more time, admitting she loves the lance, apologizing for the trouble, but insisting he's doing it for the unit. Natalia, finally steadier, admits becoming a dancer is a lot since she's never trained, yet Silva steps in with confidence, promising she's got the talent and telling her to trust his call. His burning gaze locks onto hers, and after a beat of hesitation, she finally gives in, because she understands. Once she's agreed, Silva wastes no time. He thrusts a brand new outfit into Natalia's hands. She takes the order, but her eyes go wide as disbelief hits hard, and Silva just shrugs it off like it's nothing, saying, "Since you agreed, there's no issue." She clutches the outfit and frets over whether it'll actually suit her, admitting she's never once felt very feminine. But Silva brushes her worries aside fast, straight up telling her it'll look amazing because she's got an incredibly sexy body. He swears it'll look incredible on her, and ignoring the unit's needs, she asks what he asterisk, her captain, thinks. Then his whole attitude snaps into wild, manic excitement as he leans in with a huge grin and blurts that he wants to see it. A moment later, her voice cuts in from the doorway. She rushes an apology for making Silva wait, and when he turns, his face shows pure shock. She stands right in front of him, transformed on command, now wrapped in a daring flower dancer outfit, barely holding back her nerves, and asks, eyes full of doubt, if he truly approves of how she looks. With her standing right in front of him, Silva's grin went huge and triumphant as he crowned her looks perfect, then basically sealed it with one more jab. Yep, this was just another reason he'd pushed her to become a dancer. He'd learned from experience that the more serious a character got, the more embarrassment power they unlocked, boosting their support skills in a wild spike. And for Natalia, who was all heart, it was unreal. Her stats shot up by 1.5x, and now her special skill would be treated as a dancer ability, cranking the class change even harder. And that was where the momentum started to explode. His optimization still wasn't done, so he tore through the barracks, firing off assignments with his deep know-how to squeeze out maximum efficiency. He even picked one surprise soldier and ordered him to become a sorcerer, tracking every win in his head. 2 more left. He cracked open the door, and there they were, the last 2. A memory hit him like lightning. In his past life, he'd played this game to death. Right in front of him stood Kyle Tranchant, the original protagonist, and Mia Hawkeye. It was the supporting heroines. That mind-blowing know-how was his secret weapon. He'd even wiped out the game's toughest hardcore racing event, proving how deadly strong it is to wear that silver peer role. With that kind of experience in his bones, there was no way he'd lose or die in this world. Fueled by that conviction, his face hardened into steel, and he swore, right there and then, that he'd fight tooth and nail all the way to the very end. In a bare, almost empty room, a spiky-haired young man bursts in and makes his entrance known, and right away Kyle, another young guy, freezes in shock, while Mia lies on the bed still. The newcomer strides up, tells Kyle to stay put because he looks worn out, then his eyes snap to Mia as he asks, has the survivor finally woken up? He keeps his eyes on Mia, breathing easier when he sees she has no major injuries, like she should have already come to. He points out the doctors didn't find anything wrong, and she doesn't look like she's in pain. Then he declares with real confidence that she'll wake up sooner or later. His expression hardens and his eyes narrow with grim clarity. Because yeah, he knows too, and he's fully clocked what this young man really is. Her thoughts spill a secret history, Rhea Eternia, blood of Eternia's founding clan, and the reincarnated sage who sealed away an evil god 2,000 years ago. And Kyle, he's the reincarnated knight who once guarded that sage. Both of them have been dragged back to expose the truth as that evil god starts to claw its way into the world. But right now, they remember nothing and still wield none of their past power. The stakes are insanely high, so the evil god yanks monsters out of a rift to hunt them down, and the only way through is to reclaim their missing memories and powers. If Kyle or Rhea dies, the evil god gets resurrected, and the world gets wiped out for good. That's why he can't just bail out and run. He has to stay and keep them alive, swearing he'll take action the moment Silva's death finally comes. With resolve hardened in his chest, he swings toward the pair and declares he's here to talk to them, then locks onto Kyle and says he's got something he wants to hand over. Kyle stares back, totally confused, and blurts, "What could it be?" Right then, he thrusts out a long, silver spear. Kyle's eyes blow wide as he recognizes it. Mia snaps upright, fully alert, and gasps like her soul just got punched. She recognizes the captain's spear, the very heart of their troop, and Kyle jerks back in horror, yelling that he can't possibly accept something like that. Force senses a brutal trial on the horizon, one that will crush Kyle and Rhea into fleeing as soon as Rhea wakes up. From there, they'll get slammed with endless danger and terrifying monsters. And Force is sure of it. With the silver spear in hand, Kyle, no matter how low his status is, will survive the ordeal and fight his way through. He kept driving the spear toward Kyle, practically shoving it into his hands, and told him to take it, until Kyle's eyes went wide with panic and he shoved back hard, swearing he couldn't possibly accept it. The young man jerked back hard, slapping his palms flat on the spear shaft and forcing a gap between himself and that offered weapon. He heard Kyle out, but he slammed the brakes on doubts. No time to hesitate. He tried to play it cool, calling the whole thing just a spear, then flipped the script and barked that it was a captain's order. Refuse it, he warned, and you'd be breaking military protocol. With a spear finally in Kyle's hands, he whipped around to Mia for backup, flat out asking what she thought. Then Mia, completely flustered, nodded shyly and agreed it suited him perfectly, and right when she did, Kyle spun back and practically grinned, "See, you look amazing with it." Kyle stared in horror, then snapped that he was going to talk to Mia next. Her eyes flew wide in shock as she wondered if she was getting dragged into this too. She slid a tiny cross-like emblem into her palms, held it right there, and urged her to take it. She stared down at the object, eyes narrowing like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then the captain shot back with a firm gesture. "Yep," he seemed to say, nailing her unspoken question in place. He declared that as of today, she was the new captain, and Mia's shock hit like a wall, total, crushing, unmistakable. She immediately blurted, tears streaming as she swore she couldn't possibly take on that role. Yet his scheme was already rolling. He knew Mia Hawkeye, Kyle's childhood friend, was one of the story's heroines, and even if her power was clunky at the start, once it hit higher levels her bow skills and spirit power made her one of the strongest support characters out there. Then there was that bonus mechanism, the one that handed out captain's experience points, and he planned to use it to level her up, pushing past Silva's faded death. Even as she blurted flustered, "No," again and again, he just grinned and urged her to finally try the insignia on her shoulder. Her eyes dropped as she laid out her reasoning, and you could tell it crushed her. She'd only just joined the troop, barely even learned the other soldiers' names. Yet the weight of that responsibility felt massive and totally undeserved. She's frozen in place while the player scrambles to calm her down, and he tells her he handled the role before, so she'll be fine too. Then pushes her to be captain, bark the orders, and dump all that painful office grind on Natalia. He keeps insisting this wasn't his choice at all, and when he blurts that it's the eternal tree's will, written in a prophetic book, Mia freezes in shock. In the holy empire of Eternia, the eternal tree isn't just a national symbol, it's treated like God's own presence, so the eternal trees will become the ultimate law. An absolute order every soldier must obey without a single doubt. Even he has to admit this tale sounds twisted, but that morning the throne maiden herself handed him the decree, so his face tightens. He knows it's a lie, There's no such thing as God's will, and still, he decides they'll never find out. Back with the others, Natalia fires a question at Kyle. What do they do now? Kyle sighs like he's accepting fate and pushes the idea that Mia should step up as captain, because that prophecy isn't something you can dodge. Not ever. Then he pivots to the player and demands to know what the former captain plans next. The player hits Natalia with confidence, telling her skill will back Mia the way it's meant to. He shoots back with a confident grin and tells everyone he's thinking about taking a little trip. Right before he leaves, he can't stop thinking about how easily they got played. Though Natalia only protests for a moment, he's convinced they'll be okay, because his real worry hits next. Can the army power up in the 4 weeks before Silva's death event? He realizes this decision could totally steer the rest of his life, and he steels himself, locked in on 3 big goals he has to achieve. His first mission: get stronger, level up, finish his armor, and lock it in. He figures Silva's skills are already way too brutal, so training him right now would be a waste of time. So yeah, this power boost becomes the nice bonus, not the main event. Next up, he lays out his second plan: level everyone else. Silva's not the only one, he says. Those troop members are still low-leveled and badly equipped, so they've got a lot of room to grow, and right now that's the only real road to power. He adds a warning too: if a monster like him, someone who can erase weak enemies in a blink, joins their grind, it'll mess up how the experience points get shared. With his first plans locked in, he stared down his next move. Goal 3 was clear: track down fresh allies, because the world was packed with potential candidates. He knew something wild. Depending on the method, you could snag people with insane abilities even right at the very beginning of the story. A desperate cry split the air. Silva Pierce had showed up. While he was already plotting the quickest route to recruit powerful allies in no time, knowing he couldn't afford wasted moves or slowdowns across multiple storylines at once, he shoved aside tangled leaves and charged straight through the thick foliage, chasing the exact source of the commotion. He skidded to a stop when a woman's voice ripped through the air, begging for help, and before he even thought, he told her to stay right where she was. Before he could even blink, she got yanked violently from behind. Her scream got snuffed out instantly. His eyes blew wide when he spotted her attackers, goblins, and suddenly the game lore slammed into his brain. No female goblins, because they'd use young human women to breed. The game never showed anything that vile, but right here in front of him sat the nightmare proof. This wasn't a game at all. It was real. The woman shrieked as the creatures tore at her clothes, ripping her open like it was nothing, while Silva stood there, utterly frozen by pure terror. And the worst part was that in the game he'd have shrugged and taken the fastest, most efficient path. But this wasn't a game. He dug in his heels, jaw clenched, because his mind was made up. There was no way he could walk away and leave her like this. With a grim, determined glare, he charged straight into the chaos. His sword snapped through the air, and one goblin hit the ground as he launched into a raging counterattack. He hacked through the last goblins, his blade screaming like a steel storm, and with every brutal swing they dropped, piling up across the forest floor. Once the last goblin hit the ground, he spun to the woman he'd saved, knelt in front of her, and asked softly if she was okay. Her face streaked with dirt and tears as she looked up at him. She pressed against him, breathing easier now that the terror was over, and he stayed there like a wall, sword up, eyes sharp, guarding her in the hushed calm after the storm. Her first jolt of shock crashed into pure confusion. She stammered, "Who are you? Where are we?" while her voice shook like crazy. He just shrugged and said he was a passerby who'd already handled those monsters, and when it finally clicked that he'd saved her, her breath hitched, only for him to glance at her status and quietly curse the detour for burning so much time. His eyes sharpened as it all clicked. Her condition was brutally dire. He'd even toyed with recruiting her if she had any fight in her, but the answer hit hard. She wasn't a real player at all, just an NPC. Right as he turned to go, she blurted out, begging him to stop and wait, then poured out gratitude and insisted on paying him back, warning that refusing would stain her name as a merchant. He brushed it off fast, saying she didn't owe him anything and he was running out of time, so she had to get out of the forest before his help went to waste. She shot out her hand, begging with a desperate voice, but he never slowed. He strode away and abandoned her in the clearing, his mission screaming louder than anything she could say. After a while, he rode up onto a hill and stared down at a sprawling city, where a giant coliseum blazed across the skyline. Relief hit him hard because even with the delay, he still made it right on time. This was the land of Fist, one of the kingdom's biggest cities, treated like holy ground for martial arts, and even early in the game it was easy to access and packed with chances you couldn't find anywhere else, even if it didn't tie directly into the main story. He loomed in that massive, shadow-choked archway, staring straight ahead with one mission burning in his head. He'd come to this city for exactly one reason. He stood in front of a roaring crowd, his name crashing through the arena walls, Silva Purse. Whispers exploded across the stands. They swore he was that mysterious assassin from the royal capital. But inside his head, there was only one mission: grab the money, earn the fame. In the world of IOE, there's a stat called *fame***, and it's wired straight to your reputation. Earn more, and you unlock sharper discounts and special quests. Sure, the main story has its own road, but the fastest way to rack up fame. Step into the arena and prove you can rise on your own power. The latest winner is shouted to the roaring crowd, and then Silva Pierce steps in like he popped out of thin air. A young, silver-haired noble with eyes set on the prize, because for him, a win on this scale is just a warm-up. Right after he wins, an official strides up, praises him for the win, and shoves the reward money into his hands for that day's fight. He marches his fresh earnings into a store, hoping the fight's prize lands on something good. Then it does. The toe of the great runner. It's not exactly amazing, but it's not trash either, and the real win is the pouch of coins he walks out with, which he's already convinced is plenty for whatever he plans to do next. It's a paradise for gamblers, where fistfights explode by day and the stakes hit like a truck at night. The Fortune Casino. A woman in a bunny suit greets the crowd, but he's walked in with one single mission burning in his head. That goal's brutally simple: make money. Dice clatter across the felt tables while chip stacks rise and vanish with every roll. He sits at the table, eyes locked on the game as the moves unfold, thinking, this one isn't meant to rake in money, but it's so real it's the exception. And it's the perfect excuse to go all out and gamble everything. The game is blackjack, super simple. You're chasing a total as close to 21 as you can, but if you go over, you're done. With a confident smirk, he locks in his decision. This young knight is itching to cash in. He blares out his move and stands up. His gamble pays off. Watch him. As the sun climbs over the city walls, he strides out of the casino with a heavy sack of winnings thumping against his shoulder. Then he laughs about his luck and slips away. He had a surefire way to win, card counting. And the game was built so real it practically begged to be hacked, with flaws you could exploit. He waved off any worries like they couldn't touch him, because he'd already hit his goal for the night, even if he could have made more. And man, the way he saw it was simple. This wasn't the real world. No hard countermeasures, no real safeguards, just casinos with blind spots where someone patient enough could pile up a fortune. Right when he was about to leave, chaos erupted at the entrance. One young woman was begging a staff member because her outfit didn't fit the dress code. Then she locked eyes with him and her whole expression lit up with recognition. "It's you, the super strong guy from earlier," she blurted, sprinting over and asking if he remembered her. He started bluffing, claiming she'd mixed him up with someone else, but she wouldn't budge. She swore she'd never forget the guy who tore through the goblins and saved her life. He let out a breath when it hit him. She was even tougher than he expected. The girl blushed, embarrassed by the mess, but she promised she wasn't going to keep owing him. His face snapped into shock as he demanded, "How did you pull off a safe trip?" She grinned and said she just followed the trail of defeated monsters he'd left behind. And somehow the whole journey turned out freakishly easy. Even with her overflowing gratitude, he brushed her off, snapping that if all she wanted was a simple thank you, she should be happy and get out because he was in a rush. Then he muttered that maybe she'd only slipped through on luck. The stench of goblin blood from their first run was still clinging to her, hiding her from every other monster. She finally cracked and spilled the real reason she kept pushing. She was sobbing that the staff wouldn't let her into the casino, calling it discrimination and begging him to help. He just sighed and jerked his chin at the sign at the entrance. One tire had to be worth at least 10,000 G to get in. The girl went pale, whining that the clothes would drain her dry, but he cut her off. Rules were rules, so she needed to stop. Her hopes got crushed on the spot. No joke. She barely whispered as her shoulders collapsed, defeated, because she'd already traveled so far chasing the dream of getting rich quick. Seeing her crushed, he leaned in and fired off one simple question. Why did she need money so badly? She looked up at him, blinking, totally thrown for a second. She fired off her whole story. How she dreamed of opening her own store in the capital, how she'd fled her hometown at 20 for that exact goal, and how goblins had attacked her the second she arrived, then shut her out of the very place she needed to bankroll her future. As he listened to her run of bad luck, he couldn't help but doubt her get rich, plan through gambling and think straight up that she might be an idiot. But then he noticed it, her eerie honesty, her blind obedience, and something clicked. Maybe she wasn't useless. Maybe she could actually be useful. He stared down at the young woman, smirked like he already had the upper hand, and told her she'd have to earn it, while she just stammered in stunned disbelief. She cornered him for answers, said she wanted the money, and still demanded why he'd actually help her. Then he shrugged it off with one cold line. It was just a whim, and he even pushed to ask her name. She lit up and hurriedly introduced herself as Ramaphoras from Maiden Village, placing herself right under his care. Down that cold stone corridor, they headed side by side, and he wasted no time. He fired off his plan like it was already in motion. She shot him a question about how he planned to make money in a place like this, and he answered with zero hesitation. He'd earn it by stepping into the city's legendary arena, fighting for it. She just couldn't believe how blunt he was. The truth hit her like a spark. He wanted her in his corner, dead serious. So she squared her shoulders, took the role with fresh fire, and proudly told him he could always count on her to throw in the towel when it mattered. He shut down her assumption on the spot and told her she totally wasn't getting it. So she blinked in confusion and demanded, "So, what do you want me to do, exactly?" He shoved a huge, heavy sack of coins into her hands, and just like that, told her one thing: grab it all and bet on him, no questions. She staggered under the weight, gasping that it was insanely heavy. He calmly told her the sack was packed with about 2 million G, and warned her not to drop it. The sheer amount blew her mind, and she screamed in total shock. "You really won all of this just now at the casino." He snapped at her, called her an idiot, and ordered her to stop shouting the amounts so loud, then barked one last stern command. Bet on him for the next 3 matches, and don't you dare lose a single coin before then. So terrified, she could only nod and agree. Ramafire stammered out her confirmation, like she was trying to make sure he heard her loud and clear. And with a face full of worry, she asked him straight up who he'd be squaring off against in the match coming next. His calm answer hit her like lightning, and suddenly panic took over her chest, because he was up against the grandmaster of the arena. Roma's eyes went wide with terror. She blurted that this was pure madness and demanded to know why he'd even choose that fight. She spilled every ounce of her terror, telling us the Grandmaster was Tyron the Wicked, an undefeated monster for 3 whole years. And even she, just a lowly villager, knew exactly how terrifying his reputation was. Her warning spiraled into panic. She pleaded that he couldn't go through with it, that he might die. She painted Tyron as the real monster behind the city's slave and drug rings, the kind of villain who'd cheat without blinking to snatch victory. But Silva just smirked, saying Tyron's name was exactly why the betting odds were so stacked in their favor. Then he reassured her to relax, because he knew men like Tyron far better than she ever did. Later, right in the arena, the announcer shouted that Silva had shattered the victor, because after he wiped out a top-ranked fighter in one brutal instant, it was over. When the announcer lunged in for an interview, Silva yanked the mic away, stared into the roaring crowd, and unveiled himself as a mysterious rising star, then crushed the vibe with his savage claim that everyone he'd faced was weaker than goblins. He even said he'd come straight from the capital just to hunt down real heavy hitters. He kept rolling with his speech, openly clowning the Grandmaster, mangling his name like he meant to, calling him a wild, baldy muscle man, and flat-out challenging why his undefeated record even mattered. Then his eyes snapped across the crowd and locked onto a woman with cat-like ears, declaring she looked straight out of a fairy tale and was made to be a champion. He boldly told her not to fear him and to come with him, and that swagger instantly lit up the crowd when another spectator shouted for him to stop the abuse. The provocation landed hard, and Silva flashed a cocky, dare you smirk, while Tyron the Wicked watched from the side, his rage twisting his face into a teeth-baring snarl. That insult lit a fuse. Heavy, enraged footsteps thundered through the stone corridor, and a clash was about to explode. Later, in a back room, Silva stood there like he owned the silence, looming over several unconscious men. Roma crashed through the door, shaking with panic, yelling that she warned him this was a terrible idea. Silva played dumb on the spot, just tilting his head and asking, "So, who are these defeated guys?" He spun toward her, voice dropping into a grim whisper, and flat-out confirmed it. This was almost certainly Tyron's doing. Then he snapped her into caution, telling her to watch her step from now on and make sure nobody ever catches them talking. With his hood shadowing his face, he strides up to the bed in counter and boldly vows he's betting a massive wager on himself to win, while the clerk behind the counter just freezes, eyes wide in shocked silence. Once the wager was locked in, the story blew wide open in the grand arena. Crowds packed the stands like a roaring ocean, all waiting for the main event to hit. Down in the middle of that arena, the seventh match gets called, Tyron the Despicable versus Silver Pierce. And the second they lock eyes, the tension in the air turns razor-sharp. Tyron shatters the silence, calls Silva boy, and smirks as he bluffs praise for actually getting this far, then admits Silva's strong enough to be worth fighting. So he throws down a deal. If Silva drops the insults and swears fealty, Tyron could take him in and spare him a beating so brutal he'd never walk again. Silva flashes a sharp grin, tells him he's grateful for the offer, then shuts it down, hard. He warns that if word got out he'd been working with a troll, his popularity would crash overnight. The insult hits like a blade, Tyrant's face is sour, and he insists he's a merciful man just to act like he never even heard it. Then he barks one last order, bow and swear fealty. Silva is unimpressed. He shrugs off Tyron's grandstanding as pure waste, and then he snaps, telling Tyron to drop the nonsense and attack already, sneering like, "Are your hands just for show?" That final taunt snaps Tyron completely, roaring that since Silva already showed his fangs, Tyron can die right there. And before the words even fade, Tyron springs his trap. Two huge, intricate magic circles explode to life underfoot. His eyes flare wide, everything clicks in an instant, and he realizes those magic circles weren't cast on the spot. They had to be buried in the arena and planted there long before the fight ever began. The trap finally reveals its nasty plan. One circle shackles him with a binding field to slow him down, while the other spits out a vulnerability field that smashes his physical defense. And the whole time Tyron gets boosted by his own magicians. Silva grinds his teeth, realizing just how many brutal precautions were set up just for him. He stays perfectly frozen inside the magical bindings as Tyron, the Wicked, crashes forward and hammers his fist into the arena floor. Stone explodes on impact, yet the captain is nowhere in sight, and up in the stands, Ramaphoros and the player stare on with wide, worried eyes. The massive warrior pants hard, eyes blazing at the empty air, then roars a brutal challenge, demanding what that piece of trash is going to do now, ordering him to finally recognize real power against the strongest. Sylvia snaps into view behind him, totally unscathed, confidence oozing like smoke, and with zero hesitation she fires back, asking if Tyron's done with his attack yet. Ice locks in, his mind sprinting as he counts the damage per second of his surge, minus the defense drop from that magic circle. Even after he factors out Silva's passive, the math screams one thing. It doesn't make sense. How the hell is his opponent still in skates? Silva gives a small wince, admits he felt every hit, and says he finally understands what it's like to eat exactly 100 damage. Tyron freezes, stares like he can't believe it, then roars that there's no way he should still be standing. Then he spills the truth. He'd been craving a real damage test for ages, but finding someone reckless enough to actually hurt him was a nightmare. With a nasty smirk, he needles Tyron, saying those cheap tricks still gave him solid, useful data. As Tyron stammers in confusion, Silva's face turns cold. His eyes flash with ruthless intent as he coldly confirms Tyron is exactly the kind of insignificant opponent he needed for his experiment. That insult slams into Tyron like a match to gasoline. His roar tears through the air as he swears there's no way he can lose. And right on cue, a brutal aura explodes around Silva when he answers with a ferocious battle cry of his own. That burst of raw power summons a giant fist of rock and earth, blasting through the air and smashing down on the tyrant, flinging a massive man clean off his feet with brutal force. He slams into the arena floor so hard the stone explodes into shards, cracking and flying on impact, while, just a short distance away, Silva stands completely composed, the summoner who delivered that devastating hit. He towered over the wreckage, facing away from a crowd left stunned stiff. Down in the arena, Tyron's body lay deathlike among shattered earth, while up in the stands, a young man stared in total disbelief, watching the whole brutal ending hit way too fast. The shock hit like a punch. Ramaphorus just stood there, eyes wide, face twisted between disbelief and pure horror, when a voice finally cut through the dead silence and dropped the verdict. Grandmaster Tyron had lost consciousness, so he couldn't keep fighting. The final announcement hit like thunder, loud enough for everyone to hear. And when the name Silva Pierce boomed out, a confident, predatory smirk snapped onto his face as he seized his victory. With banknotes exploding into the air, Roma erupts in unrestrained joy, firing cheers while she tosses the cash up like confetti. Stunned, she blurts that she's never seen this much money in her life. Then from his seat, the player shouts for her, and she shoots back an instant apology, swearing she'll clean up the mess right away. He shuts his eyes with a defeated sigh, thinking, yeah, it's pointless to fight it, because he knows most people will never lay eyes on a fortune like that in their whole lives. Roma just can't wrap her head around it. How can he stay so calm with a staggering 100 million G splattered all over the floor, all while she's stuck eating tough, cheap jerky? And when she presses him, he shrugs it off and says he honestly doesn't care about the jerky. She argues that since they're in Casino City, they've got to go all out and live it up in a fancy inn. But he shuts that down fast, saying it's way too far from the merchant's district and would just waste their time. Her imagination went off the rails as she painted the life he could live, using his fortune to do whatever he wanted, becoming a hero everyone admired, eating like royalty, and basking in the glow of beautiful women all around him. Tone snaps into pure awe as she stares at him, blurting out, "Why are you so powerful?" and insisting he's the strongest person in the world, stronger than anyone she's ever seen. He calmly says he's not here to rest or chill. He's got a mountain of things to do, plain and simple, and she just repeats his words like, "A mountain of stuff." That smile drops, his tone goes ice cold. He admits her hunch is right, saying he won't label it a mission, but he absolutely has a bigger purpose. The moment hits Roma like a thunderclap. Her eyes light up with pure, sparkling admiration as she blurts out that his dedication is downright impressive, because he's not chasing greed or lust at all. He's locked onto something far bigger. And in her heart, meeting him is the greatest thing that's ever happened. Overwhelmed by her respect for him, she drops to her knees, smashes her forehead to the wooden floor and begs, straight from the heart, to be allowed to walk with him all the way to the end of his journey. Her desperate plea hangs there while he weighs his choice, and then it hits him. He sees her ambitions like a mirror of his own, pressing the question, why wouldn't she chase her dream of opening a store in the capital when her cut of the winnings could make it real right now? He snaps at her that she's overestimating him, but from the floor she won't back down, begging him to accept it, insisting she's right. With a tired breath, he finally caves. Geez, all right then. And the second he does, her face flips to wide-eyed, hopeful disbelief. Before she can even blink, he leans in, cradles her chin, and demands she say where she's from. So she jolts, stammers out, Madden Village, a tiny town famous for sheep and cows. His thoughts snap back to the place she named, Maiden Village, and suddenly he's staring at it like it's burned into his brain, like the game he's crushed thousands of times. It's a nowhere town, barely even on the map, with 0 quests and no stores, and all he can remember is that brutal, endless grind, hunting sheep for every last scrap of resources. Right back in the present, he whips out a paper marked with the letters B and C, holds it up, and asks if she can read it. She squints, utterly clueless, demanding to know if it's some kind of foreign language. He watches her fail to read the letters and, in his head, wraps up the test. He'd hoped she was a reincarnator like him, but this crushes that theory. She's just an ordinary character, and she's still totally baffled by the bizarre questions he threw at her. Once his test is over, he slams out his final terms and demands she obey him from this day forward. No excuses, no regrets, even when this road turns deadly. With a steel-like backbone, she nods and swears her mind is already made up. He accepts her vow, bluntly warning that he won't take the blame for whatever follows. Then her face explodes with pure joy. She floods him with gratitude and swears she'll do anything she can to be useful. While she shines, he lets out a small, quiet sigh. Her spark reignites and she blurts out, "So what's the next move?" He just watches her, a faint smile tugging at his lips as his mind races, because bringing her with him costs nothing, and that just a background extra vibe might be exactly the key to a whole new way to beat the game. He listens as Roma Fyrus bubbles over with wild ideas about their next mission. Another city to crush evil, maybe even a giant monster to bring down. Then he slams the brakes on her fantasies and tells her their real destination is nothing like that. Forget some epic quest. Today they're on a way more real mission, hitting the lively town square for some seriously good shopping. He orders her to grab everything he told her earlier, tells her not to stress about the money at all, and says to just take whatever she can. Roma nods and confirms she's got it. With those instructions nailed down, he decides they'll split right here. Then he watches her stride off toward the market. Alone now, his real goal finally snaps into view. Track down gear for the next stage. So he studies how the world works. Equipment comes in different rarities, and magic stones can slap random enchantments onto it. But with only up to 6 effects per item, the perfect roll is brutally unlikely, until his eyes lock onto one exact piece in the shop. He studies his prize, a plane of steel and a one-handed sword strapped to it, an ordinary blade that can only lock in one enchantment, yet somehow it's being sold for a jaw-dropping price. The shopkeeper calls out a price of $200,000, and the player instantly realizes that while enchanting is usually a total gamble, money makes the outcome guaranteed if he plays it right. With time running out, this is his best shot, so he slams a heavy pouch onto the counter and straight up demands the deal. Now that the deal is sealed, he storms out of the shop and marches through the town's stone-paved streets, jaw set, eyes locked on the road ahead. Exhaustion crashes over him, and he realizes he's barely blinked since landing in this world. Yet even as he longs to stop, he knows he's got more to finish before today's over. His steps carry him to a solid wooden door tucked in a silent alley, and just as he raises his hand to knock, a voice snaps out from a tiny window slit, demanding to know what he's there for. He barrels into the hooded figure, snatches the truth in one go, and calls them the informant. Then grills them about what they're really doing, hinting they're secretly hawking strawberry daifuku. The figure fires back, Nobody calls us that. The informants snap open in shock. Then he keeps his eyes locked on them and blurts out his real mission. He wants intel on the syndicate. The hooded figure shoots back, flat out denying the syndicate and insisting he's got nothing to sell, then tells him to go hunting somewhere else, while the player just stares, shock creeping across his face. He whips around like he's about to bolt. Then it hits him, the old game rule. You had to chase the informant again and again, grinding for trust until the quest finally moved. He doesn't leave. He slams a hand onto the wall, triggers a skill, and lightning blinks to life. With a blink, he phases through the solid wall and pops up in the informant's secret room, right behind the guy's surprise. The informant jerks back, furious, yelling how he even got inside. The player stays cool and dry, saying, "So this is how you treat a customer." Inside, he leans in hard, telling the informant he knows exactly what they know and he'll pay the fee. Panic erupts as the informant swears they know nothing and begs him to leave. Then the player drops his trump card, straight up asking how the informant, now the king of the arena, could possibly know something like that. He grabs the intel, flings a pouch of money into the informant's hands, and orders him to bolt. And as the informant snatches the cash, he hisses, "Stay clear of the syndicate if you want to live," then disappears into a dark alley. Once again, he's alone with his thoughts, replaying the whole exchange, and he already knew exactly how the informant would answer. The real move. He had to wait until he'd racked up enough fame, then ask. He's sure he hit every requirement, but there's still one tiny crack of doubt in his chest. His thoughts get interrupted when a storm of dark energy spirals in and smashes into a nearby building, detonating with a brutal blast. He just freezes, eyes bulging at the wreckage. He stared as a figure rose out of the wreckage, voice slicing the air, cold, calm, and lethal, as they thundered a decree. Anyone who dares to dig into the faceless ones gets sentenced to death. The assailant finally stepped into view, dark-haired, wearing glasses and a mask that hid their lower face, cloaked up and ready to strike. The moment the figure lunged, he slipped aside and screamed in alarm, because he instantly knew what this was, the main quest tied to that faceless conspiracy. The attacker was one of Tyron's deadbeat troublemakers, stacked with high stats and swinging two swords. He tightened his grip on the truth. His job was to crack open the syndicate's secret acts and slam the brakes on their whole scheme. The attacker surged forward, and when he got close enough, he clocked it. Dark Moon, twin blades called Waxing Moon and Waning Moon. He ran through the right-hand blade's secrets, the Waxing Moon, because it didn't just slash you with bleeding. It stacked that bleeding again and again like no other. That left-hand blade and the Fading Moon combo turned every fresh bleed into pure chaos, and he knew, cold and certain, that if he got tagged even once, the damage would spiral out of control. When the assassin dropped from above, he spat out a curse. Everything about the moment screamed, "Set up." Now he'd been shoved into a tight alley with zero space to move, and he had to square off against a truly exhausting opponent. He lunged sideways at the last second, barely dodging the assassin's strike as the blade smashed into the stone where he'd been standing moments ago. The assassin stayed ice cold and told him to calm down, but he wasn't buying it. He snapped back that they never planned to listen to him anyway. He sprang back again and put distance between them. Because sure, wiping them out would be easy, but his real mission was way messier. He needed them alive and intact for what came next, and catching them without a scratch was a nightmare. Since the second he even looked like he'd bring danger, they just teleport away. He clenched his jaw and knew there was no way out. Letting that opponent slip would wreck every plan he'd built. Sweat dripped down his face as he locked eyes with the masked figure, demanding, "You ready?" The assassin's gaze sharpened, muscles tightening like a trigger right before the strike. The assassin shot forward into the cramped alley, and with a wild grin, he flung his arms wide like it was all a game. Calm, even as he clocked that they'd been hunting his neck the whole time, and then he tossed them one shot to prove themselves. In a split second, the assassin surged forward, right into position, because he was ready. He grabbed his opponent's arm hard, smashing the attack out of the way. Pain flashed across his face, but he clamped his jaw shut and vowed he'd finally caught them. Right before they could even catch their breath, he twisted hard and slammed in a brutal judo throw, crack, sending the assassin face first into the ground. He coughed, gulped air, and realized his old judo training had just saved his life. With his opponent finally pinned down, he yanked the mask off and, boom, it fell away to reveal a young woman, tears pouring from her terrified eyes. And in a soft voice, he told her he was sorry she had to hide behind something like that, promising she'd feel better soon. Then his eyes caught a thin trickle of blood, and the woman stared ahead like she'd already left this world. She started whispering a warped, broken litany, words and pictures snapping out of place, stitched to junctions, regret, and raw impulse. Then the images spun to pinwheels, puddles of blood, and wide flower fields, until it all slammed back into coming home. Her voice tangled in sorrowful confusion. Her stare stayed miles away, like one pupil had turned into something cold and machine-perfect. Then she breathed out one last, chilling whisper, and the word abyss hit like a drop into darkness. The scene flips on like a switch. Now he's hovering over her, eyes blazing, trying to snap her out of that trance. He shouts, "Wake up, Mitsuki." And just like that, morning arrives. Her eyes snap open, bursting with confusion, and she looks up at him dazed, then hits him with a question that freezes his blood. Oni-Achen's eyes blow wide, pure shock and disbelief. Silva Pierce sprawls on the rotten floor of a crumbling building, staring up as the hooded assassin bears a dark wound in his chest. Then he spits that Silva's little sister has caused him nothing but trouble. Mitsuki slinks in a meek apology, only for her eyes to go wide in pure confusion as she blurts, "Why is my only Ai-chan even here?" He leans in, eyes blazing with intent, and tells her not to worry. Just do exactly what he says, because it's always been like this. Mitsuki's face twists into pure shock and disbelief. Meet Mitsuki. She's a young woman on the Faceless Syndicate's assassin team. A man-made human weapon packed with inhuman powers that let her erase any target without mercy. The words Silva spoke were the trigger. She was running a full-on brainwashing spell, and anyone who uttered those few exact lines would instantly be seen as her older brother, forcing her to obey every command without a single doubt. He can't help but think, yeah, this is a pain, but the payoff is huge. He's finally got a dependable partner in his corner, because Mitsuki's a top-tier assassin, already starting at level 40. The plan is crystal clear. Right now, he only wants the most overpowered crew by his side. He turns to the now drowsy Mitsuki, tosses her some candy, and she lights up with a happy yay. Her whole vibe flips in an instant. She clings to him sweetly, asks what they'll do next, and can't wait to tear someone apart for him, her face glowing with pure, devoted joy. He fixes his gaze on her calmly and tells her she doesn't have to kill anyone anymore. And Mitsuki's eyes widen at this sudden order. A calm front shatters the moment a brutal sting rips through his chest, and he clutches himself hard. Mitsuki's bright smile disappears in an instant as her eyes widen and she blurts, "Are you okay?" He clenches his teeth and insists they'll turn back to the beginning. He pops open a tiny container and mixes up a remedy, because that dark moon bleeding is wrecking him hard. Even with all his endurance, his body can't shake it alone. Still, he whips around to Mitsuki, flashes a steady smile and tells her he's okay, so she won't worry. He winces and clutches his side as a brutal stab of pain rips through him. Then he swears he'll never touch whatever caused this again, while Mitsuki watches with calm, unshakable focus. The strain hits like a truck, and he topples backward onto a stack of sacks, gasping and sobbing from pure exhaustion. Lying there, he stares at the ceiling, and the thought hits him hard. 3 days have gone great, but what if this is the one rare moment where rest finally feels deserved? Then he tells Mitsuki she can rest too, motioning to a chair nearby. She's stunned for a second, then quietly sinks into it. The sudden calm gets ripped open when a braided-haired young woman storms into the room, grinning as she cheerfully claims she's back, her Aniki in tow, and brags that her first day as a henchman went perfectly, until she spots Mitsuki and abruptly freezes, demanding to know who this stranger is. The newcomer freezes in shock as Mitsuki whips around to Silva and demands, "Oi, who's this loud girl saying you are, calling you Oni-chan?" The newcomer panics and blurts an instant apology, convinced she just crashed something inappropriate. But Silva shoots in fast, shoving away the misunderstanding and formally introducing the quiet girl as his little sister, Mitsuki. Reeling from the shock, she blurts that she just happened to bump into Mitsuki while shopping, then rushes out another shaky, flustered apology. She steadies herself, then bows so deep it almost feels like a promise. She introduces herself as Roma, her Iniki's loyal henchman, and says she just wants to get along. Mitsuki stares down at the bowing girl, totally unreadable, while her mind quietly chews on that word. Henchman. Once the hellos were done, Roma proudly held up a sack packed with mysterious, dark, multifaceted gems, and practically begged for my honest take on her treasure haul. She told him that she'd followed the plan, sprinted through every material shop in the city and wiped them all out, snatching every last multifaceted gem they had. She puffed out her chest and asked, smugly, if she'd managed to snag a decent amount, then declared that this work was the ultimate proof of her admiration. He smirked as he looked down, admitting it was a solid start, but nowhere near the finish line, and that they'd need about 10 times as much. Her face collapsed, and tears spilled into her eyes as he told her she could finally rest for the day. But the search didn't stop. Tomorrow she'd have to start again, pushing on to the next town if she had to, and with a crushed heart, she quietly nodded and promised she'd do her best. As Mitsuki stormed off, she suddenly popped up and demanded to know why that thing was tailing him. So Silva straightened it out, saying that even if it looks scary, Roma's got way more nerve than people think. Then he snapped his attention back to Mitsuki, told her he'd need her again tomorrow, and ordered her to get some real rest. She just nodded and agreed. The scene slams into a town square where a towering masked boss squares off against a smaller hooded lackey. He snaps, "Number 7, calling out the delay and demanding answers. And when they explain, they admit the target hit harder than expected, so they had to rip off his mask, then insist they brought him in alive even though they were told to kill, because the tech he carried was in a high combat state." The masked leader leans over Silva Pierce's passed-out body and demands whether Number 7 pumped him full of drugs to knock him out. Then the subordinate nods and confirms it. Those leaders narrowed their eyes and thought, because they could tell Silva wouldn't be a problem, even if he woke up. But there was still a cold hesitation hanging over their judgment. Leaning over the captive, the leader says it's a miracle. Number 7 almost never brings anyone back alive, then asks if this is the first time. Number 7 won't meet his eyes, just murmurs, "I don't remember." Cloaked in the shadows, the operative faces their leader as a sharp question cuts the air. "Are you sure about that location?" Number 7 nods and says yes, then drops the bomb. They left no trace behind. The leader whirls away like he already solved it, then calls out question 7 straight to them. "So, have you felt anything abnormal in your head, elsewhere?" Inside the cell, the captive Silk stares at his grim fate and knows he's in deep trouble. If they overwrite his brainwashing, he'll have to claw his way out. But the real nightmare is the chaos could shove his companion into teleporting away. The spotlight snaps to Mitsuki. She declares, dead serious, that she'll execute anyone her I-chan orders, even if they're tied to the syndicate. The masked leader looks like he buys it, then tells Number 7 to drag the prisoner straight to the cells, until a violent crash slams into the moment. The noise comes from a white-cloaked man as Number 7 slams him to the ground, grunting through the pain. Then he snaps back fast, and Suki rushes over, demanding her one good eye is okay. He tells her he's fine, only to mumble that the clothes on his body feel weird. She gushes that her worry is sweet, calls her a good girl, and hands her a piece of candy, then cheers for her like she just earned it, and right in the middle of the celebration, he steps in and demands she lead him straight to the exact spot she mentioned. Earlier on, the man in white snaps to attention at the end of the ship, eyes blazing as he barks, "Who's there?" And before he can finish, number 7 steps in, ready to strike. That brutal confrontation's echo barrels all the way to the mass leader's hideout, and he and a second hooded stranger jolt to attention, snapping, "What the hell is that noise? What's going on?" Back at the prison infiltration, the white-clad man towers over the guards he just dropped, then fires a question at Mitsuki. What cell are they in? She points down the stone corridor and says it's the one all the way in the back. They push to the end of the hall and spot her target, Natalia Norfolk, huddled alone on the cold floor inside a dark cell. He leans into the pitch-black cell and 2 defiant eyes snap onto him. From a throat gone hoarse with silence, a voice demands, first if he's the new warden, and then, straight up, if he's alive. A young woman's voice cuts through the cold as she sits shackled on the stone floor, gagged but still fighting for her freedom. Then she demands hot soup and soft bread to celebrate their quince. He blurts out an apology, insisting he's not alone with the masked guards, then offers her food. Right as he hands it over, Mitsuki pops out from behind his cloak and beams, calling Akatsukachin's name, and the prisoner's eyes go wide with pure disbelief. Stunned out of her mind, Akatsuki snaps, demanding why Mitsuki is here and blasting a warning about the danger, until Mitsuki drops the truth. "My Oni-chan brought me." That line hits like a slap, and Akatsuki's shock curdles into pure rage as she surges forward, roaring that the man is hurting Mitsuki again. He speaks to the mad dog princess with icy calm, telling her to breathe and insisting he's not part of the syndicate. Yet she won't budge, and she snaps back, demanding to know why Mitsuki would ever call him her older brother. Her fury rockets as she blasts him for using Mitsuki and forcing her to kill. Then she screams, demanding to know how many lies he's racked up under his orders. He stays calm and admits it all. He used brainwashing, no excuse. "I knew it," she cries. He snaps back and says, "I don't know you, but I know Suki's track record." He insists he's never told her to kill anyone, and never will. Akatsuki doesn't buy a word of it, exploding in a roar that it's just a scheme to trap and use her. Leaning in, his stare won't budge. He demands to know how someone with eyes this clear could ever be lying, and that question freezes Akatsuki's scorching rage, swapping it for doubt. They finally rip off the cover and reveal her name. Akatsuki, the 6th of her kind, Mitsuki's twin sister, a human weapon forged from the same genes. But her wild emotional bursts and weird little quirks got her labeled a failure, and they tossed her behind bars. This truth weighs like a boulder in the room. Akatsuki gapes, trembling with shock, and one thought slices straight through her fury. What if he's telling the truth? The masked man tells Akatsuki's got a power called the Lee Breaker. One glance into your eyes and she can spot the truth instantly. So their brainwashing falls flat and they label her a total failure. And then he turns to Mitsuki, pressing whether she was ever ordered to kill. She grits through the thought, remembering how the last Oni-chan ordered her to kill, while this one hasn't. Then the strain hits her hard and she gasps in agony, clutching her head as tears pour out, and the masked man softly cups her head, urging her to stop wrestling with it. Akatsuki watches the kindness play out and finally realizes he's not really part of that syndicate. But she doesn't let him off easy. She snaps that he's an idiot, no sense of danger, marching into the facility alone. Still, he just locks eyes with her and flashes a confident grin. He admits he might be an idiot, but swears he's the idiot who saves rebels when they defy orders. Then he stands outside her cell, turns his back on her, and lets suspicion linger in her eyes while Akatsuki demands to know what he's after. He shoots back fast and simple. He needs her help. The moment she demands why, his face tightens with iron resolve, and he flat-out declares he's going to seize control of the syndicate, leaving Mitsuki and Akatsuki staring in stunned silence. Before anyone can even blink at his declaration, robed syndicate guards flood in from the far end of the corridor, sealing the exit tight. One of them spits a curse and swears the intruder won't make it out alive. Out of nowhere, the sudden appearance prompts Akatsuki to get mocked for his big plan. She even asks if he plans to die after saying something that bold. The masked man doesn't blink. He just tells her to watch. Right as the words leave his mouth, Mitsuki rockets forward and cuts down the first guard before anyone can react. Right then, boom! From the masked man's position, a cataclysmic wave of energy detonates, and the whole passageway gets swallowed by jagged, blinding light as he unleashes one brutal strike. Judgment. The wreckage leaves the two sisters staring in pure awe. Akatsuki can't stop wide-eyed, completely stunned by that insane burst of power, while Mitsuki just beams, praising her Oni-chan as absolutely amazing. He spins back to Akatsuki's cell, and she demands to know why he's going to all this trouble. He doesn't sugarcoat it, he has reasons, and he needs the syndicate's power to track down and crush the real mastermind behind everything. Then he leans in and repeats his offer, straight to the point. He needs her help. He thrusts his hand toward the gagged, shackled Akatsuki and lays out his demand. He needs her help to seize control of the syndicate. Akatsuki fires back with a condition. She demands he swear to one thing. When he asks what, she orders that he never make Mitsuki take another life. He doesn't hesitate, promising right away, insisting his aim is a peaceful, spotless syndicate. Then Akatsuki fixes him with a chilling stare and vows that if he breaks that promise, she'll end him herself. With his vow sealed, Akatsuki wastes no time. He accepts, locks onto a towering shadow beast and roars for it to give up, then instantly yells for a weapon. A sword comes flying. Akatsuki launches upward, snatches it midair, and crashes headfirst into the fight. She touches down like a silent dancer, sword perched on her shoulder, and a wild grin bursts across her face. Then she whips her head toward the masked guy, calls him Oni-chan, and tells him they're going to get along. After a while, he's standing right next to Mitsuki, soaking in the scene, and a rush of relief hits him. Every key piece is finally in its place. The scene snaps forward. Then a shadowy armored figure clocks that the DLC's final battle is breathing down their neck, and this moment of strategy can't end in failure. Across from them, Silva Pierce smirks with pure confidence and declares that the fight against the DLC boss, the mastermind, has officially begun. His smug confidence flips into a sly grin, and he drops a bizarre question. Why won't his companion strip? Then he smirks and tells her to turn over a new leaf and become a dancer instead. They demanded Natalia, and when she heard it, she recoiled in pure shock, then muttered that she'd accept, only to regret it instantly, because even for the captain, she can't bring herself to wear something that revealing. Flustered out of her mind, she shakes her head and insists it's impossible, way too embarrassing, then steels herself, grips her nerve, and marches straight to the captain to make him rethink his ridiculous demand. Silva's voice snaps in midair. No jokes left, just raw panic. His face twists as he blurts Natalia, begging her for help, then urgently demands she swear on the silver spear. Her fist hammers the door, hard enough that the handle snaps clean off, and the moment it happens, she knows backing out now would be painfully, humiliatingly worse than keeping her word. After choosing her path, she grips the silver spear, eyes locked and unshaking, then starts stripping off her armor, because once she vows, she means it. To keep her promise, she's ready to throw away the title of knight. A moment later, she bursts onto the scene in dancer's gear, her armor swapped for something far more revealing. Then she nervously blurts out an apology for making him wait, asking if this is what he wanted even as she doubts whether she's really meant for this new role. Right then, Silva's voice cuts in from nearby, booming with approval. It's perfect. Inside that rustic wooden building, Akatsuki finally exhales in relief, letting the warm water pour over her as she sinks into the bath she desperately needed. From the shadows, the white-hooded man, mask gone, stares nearby and mutters to himself that it's been forever since he's had a real batch. Then she steps out of the bath, wrapped in nothing but a tiny towel. Yet he can't believe she's got zero shame, so he asks. She snaps back that she's way past that kind of feeling, because after the syndicate's guys tore through her with their inspections, the idea of getting embarrassed just from someone seeing her naked doesn't even register anymore. With a sudden rush of energy, she whips around and yells for Mitsuki, telling her to grab some underwear for her too. Akatsuki snaps at her right away, ripping into her for wandering around naked and warning her, "Don't let her brother catch you with those lewd eyes." Akatsuki is still arguing when, bam, the door explodes open, and a young woman with twin braids storms in, announcing her return. With a bright grin, she announces she's got the order. Mitsuki freezes in shock. "Wait, did my little sister multiply?" she blurts, horrified. The man just rests a hand on Mitsuki's head and smiles, calm as ever. "Nope, it's only twins." He snaps his focus to the girl and demands if she's the subordinate he was warned about. She nods and answers that he's right. Then she steps forward and introduces herself formally as Ramafuras. Jakatsuki beams and warmly grips Roma's hand, telling her it's a pleasure to meet her, and that her brother raved about what a phenomenal worker she is. Roma's cheeks flare as the praise hits, and she stammers, completely stunned. With praise on her tongue, Akatsuki wears this smug, boss-level look that locks in who's really in charge. Then she cuts straight to it, asks Roma if he brought exactly what she demanded. Roma doesn't hesitate. He fires back that he did, hands shaking with excitement. Roma fires back that she hit every nearby city she was told to, then slams a huge bag of dark, crystal-like objects into his hands. He peeks inside, nods like, "Yep, this is plenty," and praises her for snagging it all so fast. Then Roma's cheeks flare as she admits no one's ever complimented her this openly before. But that smirk creeping across her face makes him pause, because her eyes are clearly hiding something. She blurts out a quick apology for how she snapped earlier, admitting she didn't have a clue what those things were until now. "They're flash stones," she says, then crushes one between her gloved hands. Boom, an intense, brutal light erupts and her twin jerks back, shocked out of his skin. Her sister rubs the sleep from her eyes and begs, "Don't ever scare me like that again." Then, once she's steady, she demands what the stones are even supposed to do. A masked man storms in, thanks the twins for their hard work, and orders them to stay on standby for the next command. While the sister blinks in confusion, she still nods and agrees. Then he declares, "All right, it's time to start." Now the last stage of their operation kicks off. Akatsuki steps into the fight against the syndicate's mastermind, and a sharp woman in white falls into step beside them, smiling like she already knows the outcome. The masked man whips his crew into formation and bursts out that it's finally time to end this long, brutal fight. Akatsuki and the woman in white fire back with loud, eager agreement. Their road twists over a battered stone bridge and up toward a bunch of crumbling buildings tucked into the hills, and that scary question just won't let go. Could the mastermind really be hiding in a spot like this? As they close in, the woman in white gives the masked man a sharp little scolding. She didn't expect him to turn into such a worry, snaps that she wants to know how many times she has to tell him, and tells him he could at least have the decency to call her and be careful. Her face snaps into pure surprise when she realizes their destination isn't on a single map. Then he swings around without the slightest doubt and tells her, with total confidence, that their targets are right here. He lays out his confidence, saying that even with the mastermind throwing out multiple possible bases, a couple of crucial clues are enough to pinpoint the real location. The first big clue, he insists, is where the syndicate is hiding, and the next puzzle piece is the exact gear Mitsuki will have waiting when they meet. Under his mask, the masked man sized up Mitsuki's power, because this new ally doesn't play around. She always swings the one-of-a-kind weapon, Dark Moon, and she's dressed in the full faceless assassin set, but her necklace keeps flipping out, randomly swapping between 3 different versions. He clocked that she'd chosen the plain version for this run, and it snapped his focus back to the job. Then he stared into the black, cavernous entrance ahead, convinced the syndicate's mastermind was hiding there, right where the base had to be. After that, he whipped his gaze to his other companion and asked why she showed up in something so weird. She brushed off his question with a bright grin, saying it was just the new gear she'd bought. And then, bam! She and Mitsuki started lavishing him with praise, yelling that he looked so cool. Next, The masked man dangled candy in front of Mitsuki for being such a good girl, and she snatched it up with a happy little yay. Her playful grin vanished in a blink. Worry snapped into place as she grilled him for acting so carefree, warning that they were seconds away from going up against someone unbelievably powerful. He stayed stone calm, said they'd finally arrived, and pointed her toward an old stone well. Then he confirmed their target was right inside, turning her stunned silence into pure disbelief. After they dropped down the well, the trio stumbled into a massive circular cavern, wrecked with shattered pillar remains everywhere. In the middle of it all, they spotted a strange mausoleum. Then a deep voice boomed from the shadows, greeting them like they were the first guests his home had seen in ages. The woman in the headband barked for answers, demanding to know who dared show up, but the masked man didn't even blink. His face turned cold with instant recognition because he already knew. The syndicate's leader and the DLC's final boss. The voice kept talking, dripping with grin-worthy amusement as it called out its creations. Experimental Body 6, Akatsuki, and Experimental Body 7, Mitsuki, cackling that it raised them so well, right before they turned around and betrayed their creator. Then it snapped to another presence in their midst and pinpointed who he was, Silva, the captain of the Holy Attorney Kingdom's 3rd Special Task Force, his determined face coming into view as his eyes locked onto the unseen enemy. At last, the syndicate mastermind stepped into view, standing tall in the gloom, wrapped in a dark robe, gripping an ornate staff like a weapon, his face swallowed by shadow. He stared down at the intruders, speaking with unshakable authority, and told them he'd already been found. Then smiled as he said the servant of the eternal tree, Silver Wolf, must have got an insanely sharp nose. A masked man's pulse hammered with pure excitement, because this outcome was something he'd never seen before. Silva usually dies in the prologue, so the idea that dragging him here could trigger such a super-rare event blew his mind. While he rumbled on, the syndicate mastermind didn't even sense the observer's thoughts. He kept thanking the crowd, the journeys they'd clawed through, and the brutal suffering they'd paid to stand here. But the masked man wasn't buying any of it, because in his head he was counting the truth. It had only been 5 days. He mentally corrected the mastermind's assumption on the spot. Only 5 days had passed since he began. Yet that towering figure just kept repeating the same claim. They must have endured unimaginable suffering. The mastermind totally brushed him aside, then gushed about how amazing it was to finally track him down, only to turn cold the second he spoke again, saying he'd also paid the price with sacrifices for his own huge plan. He burst out that he finally did it. Then he erupted into a massive, intricate construct, forged from a fragment of Thelios, the god of destruction's power, and claimed it was the anima that once tore the world into its worst disaster. Meanwhile, the masked man stared on, irritated, convinced he was spilling the biggest story beats way too early. Rage sharpened in his chest as the mastermind turned to the eternal tree's slaves, barking that they should burn the moment into their eyes. Then he unleashed the power meant to shatter the great tree's circle, when a violent eruption of dark energy, an adorant of anima, tore into the sky. The power tore through him like a storm he couldn't stop. His mastermind's body twisted, shattered, and he howled in pure agony as the force he summoned swallowed him whole. And out of the wreckage of that maelstrom, a monstrous skeletal face started to crawl into view. Now in his place lurked a hideous monster. Its face was a nightmare skull, hollow eye sockets staring back, and a mouth packed with needle-sharp teeth. And the masked man recognized it on sight. The DLC's real final boss, a monster with strength so overwhelming it felt impossible. He replayed every brutal detail of the creature in his head, part armor, part skull-faced nightmare, while its stats screamed unstoppable, and its attack patterns hit in wild, tangled combinations. And he knew this fight would grind his bones to dust. It was stacked in 3 brutal phases, each one drowning him in even more attack patterns, packed with instant-kill moves and a whole parade of annoying gimmicks, making it the toughest encounter in the entire game. He calmly told me the invincible. Monster was only unbeatable if you fought it the usual way, and he had zero plans to do that. Hearing that, Akatsuki's face tightened. Was victory really even possible against someone this brutal? She blurted her doubt, but he just grinned and told her, "Watch me." And that calm, unstoppable confidence hit her like a star against darkness, because then he leaned in and asked, like it was obvious, "Don't I look like I've got this all figured out?" Her face changed in an instant. Trust surged in, pushing fear aside as she nodded and agreed. Meanwhile, that monstrous anima of destruction thundered its challenge, claiming their deaths would kick the world into a new dark age, and it roared for them to obey the terrifying rhythm of its power. The masked man snapped back that the creature wouldn't even get a shot, then barked for everyone to watch, right as a blinding light blasted up from the ground at the monster's feet. The creature jerked back, screaming in shock and agony as that blinding flash swallowed him whole. Enraged, the anima of destruction snapped out shadow tendrils and slammed the masked man, roaring that these tiny hits meant nothing next to its true power. Yet every word got swallowed by its own grunts of pain. The light came from a plain flashstone, one blast, and its holy power slammed the target with a stun, normally meant for puny low-tier monsters. But here's the twist. The anima of destruction had swallowed darkness, so it got carved open by that vulnerability. Still, the stun barely lasted, only 0.75 seconds, with the effect kicking in after 0.4 seconds, so in the middle of a fight you could almost never keep it going. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. But that was his exact game plan. He laid it out. Every gear slot he wore was packed with attack speed enchantments, and once they stacked with his class and skills, he unlocked a savage 200% boost, letting him strike 3 times faster than anyone else. That insane speed carved out a tiny opening for him to slam in a hit, then instantly fire off another flashstone, back to back, an endless loop with no escape. The anima of destruction roared in pure disbelief, stunned that anyone could fight with something this ridiculous and somehow make it work. He flashed a grin and said, full confidence, "Don't worry, there's a way to win." Then he dropped the real bombshell. 431 flashstones, all lined up and ready, and the syndicate mastermind just reeled back, choking on his own disbelief as the masked man stared him down and dared him to survive what was coming. Akatsuki's plan was dialed in so carefully that it almost felt inevitable. She replayed her own first estimate and smirked, because she'd only expected to need about 300 stones. And then Roma crushed those expectations and hauled in way more than she ever imagined. While the battlefield raged, the syndicate mastermind barked a grunt from inside that blinding, unrelenting flash of light. Then he snapped at his opponent, warning them not to lose control. With desperation clawing at his chest, he screamed for the ancestral spirits to wipe out his enemies. And the broken earth cracked open as dark-robed skeletons rose from the rubble, backed by ruthless phantoms of old masterminds who were already legend-level threats. The masked man's face snapped tight the moment the new arrivals showed up, but his nerve didn't budge. "Too bad," he declared. His words weren't empty bravado. Then 2 more figures slid out of the shadows, cool as ice, already set to move. The messy-haired young man grinned and told them they had a plan for these summoned phantoms too. Inside a crystal cavern, a skeletal phantom in a torn robe rises and screams for its ancestors' spirits to wipe out its foes. Then a headband-wearing woman grins and swears they've already handled this threat, while a messy-haired kid yells, snaps forward and charges straight into the undead. They blurt that this might be way easier than expected, and her partner laughs along, because this whole fight is starting to feel fun. Their swagger isn't random either. They already know the plan. They were briefed on exactly when and in what order the ghosts of past leaders would be called up from those scattered tombstones, so every time an illusion pops out, they snap it shut and seal it away like it's nothing. In the trial, Silva peers into the chaos and clashes with his own monstrous foes. One phantom even demands to know if he's got any pride left as a knight, and Silva scoffs, saying pride is a joke. When the fight starts, he swears the only goal is winning. He breaks the challenge wide open, and charges down a dark, jagged corridor. He charges the final illusion, this grotesque, multi-eyed beast, and when he finally drives the strike home, it screams in disbelief, wailing that it can't accept the Hope bloodline is getting wiped out. Then, with one last desperate roar, it gets obliterated in a colossal blast of raw force. Dust swirls away, and the once crowded circular arena stands empty, like the trial has already ended. Moments later, Silva wipes the sweat off his brow and calls the fight brutal, while the messy-haired kid can't believe they crushed it that easily. The headband woman just grins, looking totally vindicated. Then Silva cuts in, urging them to grab their prize before anything else happens. He spots the objective half buried in the dirt, snatches it up, then declares the mission over the moment he's got it. That ornate staff, traced right to the syndicate's mastermind, works as their secret command center, letting them broadcast orders to every division, so the whole syndicate stays under control from the shadows. Silva grips the staff and flashes a grin as he declares the syndicate takeover is finally finished, while the headband woman stares on with tight, worried focus, thinking, "What do we do next?" And down below, their allies hold steady, ready to spring the moment the new orders hit. He stood there in silence, his face impossible to read, and Mitsuki and Akatsuki both demanded, "What's wrong?" So yeah, what I'd heard earlier was the real kicker. He wasn't just some guy, he used to be the captain of a national army unit. Before he could even spill the details, Mitsuki skipped up to him with a bright grin, called him Big Bro, and asked where they were headed next, then teased that she had a request for both him and Akatsuki. He froze at her casual words, quickly snapping that he was a captain, not her brother, and then he formally invited both her and Akatsuki to join his unit. But Mitsuki just couldn't get it, insisting that Big Bro is Big Bro and calling him weird. He blurted out, all flustered, wondering if her brainwashing really had faded, and Akatsuki, watching them like a hawk, said it was probably a mental defense kicking back in, a fresh idea that made her perk up. Mitsuki might have just liked him, because after the brainwashing broke and reality got too brutal to face, her subconscious decided it was way easier to see him as a big brother. Akatsuki, fed up with the performance, snapped at her to stop acting like she was walking out on them, reminding her they still needed her strength. And then, with that knowing smile, Akatsuki leaned in and called him Big Bro. When everything took a wild turn, he let out a frustrated sigh, then shouted to Mitsuki that they were heading back. They burst up to the mouth of a dark cave, and fresh steel lit up his eyes. He swore he wouldn't pull any punches on his little sisters and told them to brace for what's next. Mitsuki and Akatsuki erupted into excited cheers, totally bought in. Their excitement practically crackled in the air, because now they had one mission: take control of the syndicate's power. He realized this power would turbocharge every ally around him, everyone standing here, ready to explode into the next phase of their plan. With grim determination blazing in his eyes, he vows that this time they'll flip the enemy's power right back on them and stride into the next stage. Ahead, a jagged tunnel swallowed them in darkness, then burst open into a huge cavern, where a weird, thick grove covered the ground like a living wall. Right as Kyle and Mia creep forward inside, Akatsuki suddenly snaps, telling them to stop and hold on. She rages about how it's so annoying when people slam the brakes so suddenly, and Kyle blurts out an apology. Then another soldier cuts in, snapping that Akatsuki was the one who bolted out of the barracks, and Akatsuki fires back defensively, insisting this is not how it was supposed to play out. Then she whirls to Kyle and says, hard and clear, that she never asked him to follow her, leaving him completely stunned, like his voice got knocked right out of him. Mia steps in between them, trying to shut the fight down, and tells them arguing is pointless. They've got to escape together. Kyle nods along, but he grumbles that her words always hit like a brick, and that snaps Mia into pleading, please, just stay calm. Their non-stop bickering gets cut off in an instant when a hulking monster made of black sludge bursts out of a hole in the cavern wall. Mia's stomach drops as she realizes their voices lured it, And now they're all trapped in serious danger. Kyle snaps his head down, locks onto the danger and blurts out a fast apology, owning every bit of the blame. He grabs the spear the captain hands him and vows to use it if things turn ugly. Then Akatsuki sneers like, "Nice talk, but can you actually back up those skills with a weapon that looks so deadly?" Kyle's patience finally shatters. He clenches his teeth, erupts in fury at Akatsuki for yapping again, while an exasperated Mia screams at both of them to shut it down. He and his crew slogged through the suffocating dark of that endless stone passage, and Akatsuki, worn out, muttered that she couldn't tell how long they'd been walking, groaning that it felt like a whole day had vanished. Then, bam, his eyes snapped to a tiny glimmer of light ahead, and he shouted for everyone to look. A tiny glimmer flared overhead, swelling into a brilliant round opening, so bright it shattered the suffocating, swallowing blackness of the shaft below. When they finally reached the top, a jagged earthen ceiling slammed their way. No escape, no mercy. With a rough grunt, he shoved his palm into the wall, testing how solid it was while Mia and Akatsuki stared. He poured every ounce of strength into the move, muscles screaming, teeth locked tight, then burst out with a fierce, determined cry, swearing he'd go just a little further, fist grinding into the soil as roots fought back overhead. The barrier shattered, and he slammed onto the grassy floor of a sun-dappled forest, sprawled there, wheezing as he finally caught his breath, stammering in pure relief that he'd actually made it. Then he shot up on his feet, arms flung wide, roaring with pure joy that he finally got it made out. From the shadows, Mia couldn't believe they'd really made it out, and her disbelief hung in the air. Akatsuki, though, lit up with pure relief. He said the surface was right there and promised he'd drop a rope for them immediately. She snapped her gaze to her companion, pushed Akatsuki to climb first, and insisted, loud and clear, that she was totally fine. As soon as Mia hauled herself out of the hole, Kyle, sprawled on the ground, snapped at her for dragging her feet, and she fired back that in the military she expected him, the civilian, to climb first. Kyle didn't buy it. If she had time to trade words, then she had time to climb. Akatsuki, free at last, threw their arms wide and stretched with pure joy, gushing that it felt amazing to finally see the sun again after forever. And Kyle shot Mia a smug look, teasing her about whether she'd really let herself get convinced by some simple civilian. He shrugs off that whole moment and says Leia told him to go first anyway. Then, from behind him, Akatsuki announces, "I'll help too." She sprints after her, begging to catch up, then Mia snaps, "Stop calling me Hawk," and Kyle quickly backs Mia up, saying they've got bigger problems. They need to figure out where they are. Their eyes lock onto the endless land ahead, and a thick forest looms beneath the towering, bony wreckage of dragons. Akatsuki's still crumpled on the ground when Kyle dives in and holds out his hand. She grabs it, and for a heartbeat her face gives nothing away as she whispers a quiet thank you. She instantly winces and complains that her hands are too sore to grip anything. Kyle glances over, and a flash of concern hits his face. He demanded to see her hands. When she asked why, he didn't argue, he just ordered her to show him. She ignores her own hands and grabs his instead, and Mia mutters through her irritation like this whole thing is ticking her off. Then Akatsuki snaps into an incantation, begging the eternal ring of space and time to pull up memories from the past. A bright sphere of energy blooms between her palms, and Kyle's eyes go wide as shock hits him hard, because he's not watching a trick, he's witnessing real magic. As the lights die down, Kyle stares in shock. His hand is fully healed, and even that old scar is gone like it never happened. He blurts out if it was healing magic, and Akatsuki nods, saying it's something in that same vein. Then she smirks and tells him not to thank her. She's just paying him back for pulling her up. Even after she's done something kind, Kyle still grumbles that she's got no cute bone in her body. Mia catches it, blurts, "What did you say?" And before that argument can ignite, Akatsuki slams in and orders them to stop brawling and start figuring out where they even are. Mia's plea gets snuffed out the moment a nightmare, packed with twitching eyes and a jaws-wide maw, bursts straight from the hole they just crawled out of. Mia shrieks at the others to back off right now. She freezes in horror as the creature claws its way out of the tunnel. Those same bees from before, a planet WRM. But this one is insanely bigger, and the whole scene screams that something is horribly wrong. Her shot hits the target. Then disbelief crashes in as Kyle braces himself for the fight, telling her they've got no choice but to jump in, because as part of the 3rd Special Operations Unit, something like this monster is just another day, and he snaps. Get your spear ready. He barrels straight ahead, swearing he'll take the beast down with his own hands. Then the creature rockets forward, jaws first, as Mia freezes in terror, unable to move. The beast moves like lightning. One brutal strike and Mia gets launched, tumbling hard onto the ground, while Kyle snaps out her name in pure panic. As she lies completely helpless, the monster lunges in. Then, right before it can strike, a brutal burst of magic detonates from nowhere, and glowing chains plus razor-sharp sigils rip out of the ground, snapping the creature into a stasis field. Magic floods from a woman draped in a white cloak, and Mia stares, jaw dropped, as disbelief snaps her voice into a name she can't believe is real. Rhea doesn't even look at her, just screams, "Run!" and keeps the beast pinned and fighting back. She starts to give in. Then a sudden twitch snaps her attention. She gasps and screams a warning to the woman in white. "Rhea, on your left." The beast's massive tail is whipping around and it just broke free from the magical restraints. The woman in white gets nailed to the spot, eyes blazing with pure shock. Right when the story is about to click into place, a sudden flash erupts and crackling energy snaps through the air, and a voice screams the technique as lightning blinks. A white-masked man bursts through the chaos in a blur, smashing the beast's tail with an electrified kick, cracking the ground. And then he throws himself in front of the woman to shield her, leaving me staring in pure shock. Right before the confrontation can even heat up, a brand new group storms in. Then a man in captain's armor, Silva Pierce, barks, "Are you all okay?" Kyle jerks in surprise and blurts out that it's his captain. Silva cuts them off. "Talk later," because his eyes are already locked on the danger in front of them. He stood shoulder to shoulder with his allies, locked in a united front against the colossal tunnel beast. Then it blasted out a deafening roar, and the masked man in white exploded into the air, shouting them on to smash that monster down. In a sun-dappled forest, Kyle Tranchant and Mia Hawkeye keep terrified kids behind them while a one-eyed monster snarls in front of their faces. Then a masked man in white watches from the shadows, sizing it up, and says it's weak. He's sure the special forces can take it down, and every detail he spots screams that their plan is on track. Roma slides beside him, blasts her shot straight into the chaos, and yells to Silva Pierce that kids are getting attacked, so why aren't they stepping in? The masked man stays unnervingly calm, saying the time to interfere still hasn't hit yet, even with all that danger screaming in their faces. Roma's stunned by his right moment talk, while Silva recoils, calling those tentacles downright creepy. The masked man snaps in and clamps his hand over Roma's mouth, barking for her to shut up, because his brain is already spinning as he realizes exactly where he is. This is the final stretch of the deserting Rhea event from the game, and he remembers the original tale. Silva is the one who storms in and rescues Mia at the last second. He knows this moment is make or break, since seeing Mia's abilities is what drives the story forward. Then it hits him. Mia isn't just anyone. She's the reincarnation of a legendary sage, the only one who can use dimensional. While the math keeps churning in the background, Kyle's plan to save Mia becomes a must-have move for their future romance. Mess with it at the wrong moment and you'll spark a mess of complications. Silva, catching only scraps of the conversation, snaps into it. "Who are these people?" The masked man answers, dead serious. Kyle is Silva's subordinate and the future hero who will save the world, so earning points by rescuing him right now is a smart bet. Silva just stares, completely wrecked by the cold, insane logic. Mia suddenly screams, and a colossal, intricate magic circle slams into existence. Then a stasis spell locks the beast's tentacles solid in mid-motion. The masked man spots it at once and yells for action from his Suki and Akitsuki, and Roma just watches, stunned by how fast the command hits. He stares. Then the alarm hits hard when he realizes Kyle is way farther from Mia than he ever should be. His mind races. Did the spear he handed Kyle mess up the fight, turning stronger into out of position? Yeah, it's a disaster. That monster is going to reach Mia first, and Kyle won't make it in time. So he snaps to action, calls a skill, and lightning blings through the air. A blur of motion, then he's there, wedged between Mia and the monster, snapping its attack aside. "You two all right?" he shouts. Kyle freezes, eyes wide, and blurts, "Captain, why are you guys here?" But the masked man cuts him off flat. "We'll talk later. Right now, we take down this beast." Mia can only freeze in shock, stunned that some random stranger just yanked her out of danger, while the masked man fumes at getting in his own way, realizing this was make or break and he's now messed it all up. So he vows to plot his next move after the fight. Right then, Mitsuki and Akatsuki roll up and Mitsuki snaps, "Got it," as he turns to them, telling them, dry as ice, that they sure love dragging their sisters into the mess. Right then, when the monster rips the air with a piercing shriek, Silva Pierce springs skyward and drops like a bullet toward the beast, determined to finish it fast with the least power he can. He slams his blade down with brutal force, shouts the attack's name, Judgment, and the impact blasts the ground apart, swallowing the screaming monster in a surge of pure power. His brutal strike lands with a thunderous crack, blasting a shockwave through the whole tunnel. Then the impact hurls Akatsuki and Mitsuki and him back while the tunnel beast snarls and reels from the hit. Even after that brutal hit, the beast refuses to fall. Its body is mangled and twisted, but it's still standing strong. Kyle can't believe what he's seeing. Then from the ground, Akatsuki shouts up at him, pointing him out as the brown-red spear guy and ordering him to get ready for the final strike. He gritted through the pain and dragged himself upright, muscles screaming from the chaos he just survived, while the masked man watched from afar, smiling to himself like, "Yeah, this went the right way." So Kyle could rack up some experience points instead of the masked guy snatching them all away. His eyes snap to Akatsuki, face blazing red, and it leaves him completely baffled. At the same time, Kyle bolts to Mia frantic, demanding to know if she's okay. Mia insists she's fine and says Rhea saved her. The masked man clocks it immediately. This is the big turning point, the exact moment Rhea finally cracks open to Kyle. She blurts out that she's totally fine. She can barely get the words out. Kyle whips around to the masked guy, still convinced it's Rhea, and starts thanking him nonstop for saving Mia. The second the thanks land, panic hits the masked man hard. This is a total disaster. His brain scrambles, desperate to figure out how he can possibly patch the original storyline after this wild detour. She awkwardly grabs Kyle's gratitude, then blurts out, "Who is that masked man?" Her flustered reaction throws him off, and just as he's trying to figure it out, Silva Pierce cuts in, snapping at Akatsuki for how she's acting and insisting he didn't save her for his own gain. Mitsuki steps forward and with perfect formality introduces him as Captain Silva Pierce of the 3rd Special Task Force. He formally thanks the captain for the rescue, then rushes in an apology for breaking the force's rules, ready to take any punishment. Silva waves it off for now and says they'll settle it back at the barracks, but his eyes snap straight to Akatsuki. He talks straight to her, demanding she come back to the barracks even though he can't figure out why she bolted, because he needs to get answers about her magic pronto. The masked man can't help but let out a quiet inner sigh at how the talk plays out like some predictable little game. And then, to his shock, Akatsuki lights up and agrees on the spot, declaring she'll go anywhere and spill the truth to every single question. Their instant, total obedience knocks Silva's words right out of him. A short distance away, Kyle steadies a tired Mia by offering his shoulder. Roma, watching them like it's fate, tells Mitsuki what a great couple they are. Mitsuki then points to the other pair, eyeing the weird expression on Silva's face like something's off. He shrugs it off with a booming laugh, orders Mitsuki to fetch Roma and the horse, because they're blazing for the capital next. Mitsuki nods and bolts. While Akatsuki slips in a quiet apology to Silva, the masked man just watches, panicking inside as his thoughts sprint. He knows he has to fix this detour in the story the moment they're all back at the barracks. He's totally blindsided when Akatsuki shyly asks what name she should call him, Ilvison or Captain, and the moment she looks flustered, he smirks and shrugs. Either one's fine. She chooses Captain on the spot, then bursts into a tiny, happy laugh. Even with her smile on, his thoughts scream in frustration. This is all wrong. Akatsuki isn't supposed to be like this. And that sweet maiden stare that should have been for Kyle is locked onto him instead. Horror hits him as it clicks. He screwed up the hero's rightful place. He stole it. In an office tucked inside the barracks, real Silva Pierce steps in and calls Kyle out, first snapping that the one thing that matters is Kyle's safety. Then the stern truth hits. With things this bad, she can't cheer him for breaking rules and going solo, because that move could have wrecked everything for good. And she demands to know why Kyle didn't even report to Natalia. Silva keeps pressing him, demanding to know if Carl really thought this was the right move, especially if it meant shattering their rules. And Carl answers with solid, unshaking conviction that he truly did. Silva's face eases the moment his subordinate gives that solid answer, and he finally admits, yeah, it can't be helped. Then he stands from his desk, tells Kyle, at least it's over, but make sure he understands the cost. Kyle just gambled with 2 lives. And he presses the point. If Kyle hadn't run after Rhea, she could have walked straight into even worse trouble. He keeps pressing his counsel, telling Kyle the danger only showed up because he wasn't strong enough yet. So if Kyle wants to feel shame, it should be for breaking the rules, not for trusting his convictions. Then Silva fires the real message. Never be ashamed of doing what you believe is right, even when the whole world, the law, or the eternal tree's prophecies are all lined up against you. Silva's advice snaps into a final, no-backsies command. If Kyle ever gets pulled into a similar mess, he's got to trust his own heart above everything, and own whatever happens next. That's the whole message, Silva says, just one man talking straight to another. Stunned to the core, Kyle bursts out that he gets it, then vows he'll never forget the lesson. With the lesson finally done, Silva's voice snaps back to a captain barking orders. Break the rules, endanger your comrades, and you pay. Kyle gets hit with cleanup duty, and starting tomorrow he's shoved into a special training course made to torture him. Still, Kyle takes it on the chin, no complaints, and Silva officially dismisses him. Elsewhere, the disguised observer stares at the exchange, knowing Silva's words will be crucial for Kyle's future. Yet his skin prickles because playing along in these twisted, game-like scenes is nerve-wracking as hell. Just as he's trying to steady his thoughts, Akatsuki slides into the doorway and asks for a moment. He waves it off, telling her to ask Natalia instead, but Akatsuki shuts that down. This request isn't about Natalia at all. He's thrown into a tense moment. Akatsuki's cheeks dust with blush as she holds up 2 different uniform styles, then asks which one he, as her captain, likes best. It sounds harmless, but he instantly smells the trap, because either way feels like the same minefield waiting to explode. His mind is racing with disaster on the horizon, one wrong answer, and the sealed sours can spell doom for everything, so he freezes. Before he can even breathe, Akatsuki storms in, insisting his opinion is the only one that counts. Then, right when tension peaks, a calm voice slices through the chaos, asking for just a moment of their time. Right as he's about to respond, a woman in sharp black and white robes strides in, acts shocked he's even in her office, and teases him. So you're here to take me on a date. But she swats the idea away instantly, saying she only showed up to grab a report from a recent fall disaster. This woman, she's no run-of-the-mill official. She's the priestess of the eternal tree, the only person besides the God King who gets prophecies straight from it. And sure, she carries herself with pure holiness and flawless professionalism. But that's just a mask, stitched on so no one sees the truth underneath. Her real name is Neen Eternia. And right then, that name unleashes a terrifying truth. Her smile twists into something sinister, hiding brutal power and a dark mission behind her calm mask, because she's the game's final boss. The priestess stands there in deep, motionless silence, staring straight ahead with an unreadable look, so empty it's almost haunting. He catches her scorching stare, then smirks like he already knows and asks, in a teasing tone, if something unusual is showing on his face. He keeps the chat going like it's no big deal, then smoothly suggests they grab a meal at this quiet spot he swears has amazing food and drinks. And as they lean on the balcony together, he drops the truth. He wasn't trying to be slick. He just got completely stunned by how beautiful she always looks, his voice warm, light, and charming. Even with that calm, easy vibe, he's fully locked in, because she's the final boss and beating her right here won't fix a thing. She just meets him with a sweet, gentle smile and tells him she's up for his invitation, if the chance ever comes again. Her immortality is a crushing dark curse, propped up by the forbidden bestow eternity technique, stealing eternal youth and life by draining the soul of the bloodline's youngest. And even if someone chops off her head or stabs through her heart, she doesn't die. She stays alive for millions of years. He decides, right there, that for the moment the smartest move is to leave her alone, and as he starts to slip out, he drops the detail that he ran into a young girl in the hallway, Rhea Esperanza, the one she recognizes at once. He brings up her little sisters, freshly joined, and her eyes light up right away, because in their last mission they rescued a girl with no family and gave her a place to belong until she can find her footing. He bursts into a huge laugh, saying, "Yep, we're twins, just raised in separate houses," before grinning like fate finally clapped back. And when they refused to let anything split them up again, he gave them both a shot to join the force. He leans in and tells her, straight up, that their skills are flawless and nobody pulled strings in their recruitment, then talks about Akatsuki and Mitsuki like there's zero doubt in his mind. She urges him to keep up his amazing work as captain, warning that fresh recruits are the lifeline as the fall keeps swallowing more ground. Then they both stare out at the far horizon, praying that one day eternal peace will finally be within reach. She stays stone calm while the captain praises her reliability, confirms the report is still unbroken, then dismisses her so she can slip away and knock out some paperwork. Meanwhile, Silva Pierce jumps at a knock on his door, only to discover Natalia there, grinning as she hauls in a stack of documents he already signed off on. He scans the papers, utterly baffled by her worry, and she admits she doesn't think he's involved. But the choices written in that document still feel way too strange. She fires off clear examples, like how they shut down Tanny's request for equipment repair money after a mission, then points out the real kicker. These routine claims usually get approved instantly, no questions asked. Because the details don't line up, she can't help but wonder if she read the whole situation wrong, while Silva insists, no doubt about it, that equipment repair is absolutely necessary. Her eyes stayed locked on the papers as she explained it. There were too many strange details for this to be nothing, so she figured he must have had a secret game going, because if not, she would have fixed the little mistakes herself. As they lean in and stare at the markings, Silva snaps that Tanny's request is approved. Then Natalia shakes her head and swears she remembers most of these getting shut down. Seeing her confusion, he leans in and asks if she's just wiped out from overtraining, because this blank, unfocused version of her is totally unlike her. Suddenly, it smacks into her. She stares at those symbols again, and she realizes the truth, while he keeps hammering the same claim that the document screams rejection. He blurts out a furious cry the moment the weight of it all hits, while she stays cool and calmly lays out why they're getting confused. Because in their system, an X means yes, and a circle means no. These world chronicles, some call them yoi, were unlike anything else, spreading across every land as one single, shared edition for all. On top of all those global rollouts, the language settings ran on autopilot. Yet the system could still flip between English and Wild, hard-to-find dialects like Greenlandic. Back in the admin office, she stares down at her companion and realizes those papers he swore were done days ago are still stacked high, so she blames his confusion on travel fatigue. He slumps back, completely crushed, still reeling that the confirmation and cancellation symbols he had ended up swapped in his hands. Even though exhaustion weighs on him, she flashes a bright, terrifying smile and demands he finish every single piece of paperwork before the day ends. Then when he tries to chuck it off like a joke, her grin snaps into a fierce, intimidating glare that makes one thing crystal clear. She's not playing around. She storms off in full fury, swearing she'll demand the real explanation later, and warning him to be ready for it. Then it's just him, stuck with a mountain of terrifying papers. He stares at the mess and thinks, a circle usually means yes, and an X means no. Yet somehow the system they've been wrestling with makes zero sense. After pulling an all-nighter to untangle the Army's Special Force paperwork disaster, he trudges through the headquarters halls, eyes drooping with sleep, until a voice he knows yells his name and cuts right through his exhaustion. Name, he slams to a stop, eyes snapping to the jaw-dropping status screens of the people closing in, clocking their huge levels and brutal power in an instant. The newcomers finally step into view, a grin on his face young man in shining armor, and a woman rocking sharp glasses with a fluffy fur-lined collar, and he's totally stunned to see them. She snaps at him for how bluntly he reacts, after they literally went out of their way to see him. Ceres Cobalt, the captain of the 4th Special Task Force at her side, while Regulus Aslashian, captain of the 1st Special Task Force, beams at his senior and praises his recent exploits in a. When he asks what brings the two captains here, Ceres hooks her fingers into Regulus' arm, flashing a wicked grin and insisting they're on a sweet, lovey-dovey date, shocking even they're totally drained. He's frozen in place, totally blasted by the wild chaos of the other captains. Regulus scrambles to explain that this was only joint training, but Ceres just turns up the heat, teasing that she's taking her shot at the future commander spot while the chance is still there. Natalia, meanwhile, acts like none of it is even a big deal. Scandal erupts, so Regulus whips his focus to Ceres and swears she'll never have to drown in loneliness again. But she flashes a smirk, brushes him off, and tells him to drop that obsession with the mean Silva and lock onto her instead. The rejection lands like a punch, and the young captain slumps hard, visibly crushed, because even with all his admiration for her, he bluntly admits his heart and loyalty are already locked onto his senior. Silva throws himself into a sudden burst of affection, leaning into his mentor and begging to be held and soothed like before, while Silva just stares in wide-eyed panic, sweat pouring down his forehead as everything spirals into pure absurdity. Absurd, right? After watching that stunt, Ceres finally snaps and demands they stop the nonsense. Then, just like that, she flips the mood and invites everyone out for drinks after their next official gathering. Silva is left completely wiped out, sitting there thinking, does anything in their world ever actually make sense? Just as their banter starts getting louder, a brutal thunderous roar rips through the air, barking, "Why are you causing such a pathetic ruckus?" The shock hits the whole group like lightning, and their playful bickering dies on the spot. The outburst comes from Willem Brown, the Special Task Force commander, who looms over them with cold, savage disdain. The captains instantly scramble for awkward greetings, while Ceres desperately tries to force out a laugh as the commander glares down at them, eyes narrowed to needles. Eyes blazing, he doesn't hold back. He sneers at them like pathetic whelps and greedy upstarts who'll never understand his so-called greatness, then snaps a command and forces everyone to fall in line, his ego swelling to match his massive frame. This guy's power doesn't come from merit, it's pure nepotism. As the son of the Brown Company's president, he clawed his way into the rank with dirty tricks and corporate muscle, but he's got zero real military achievements because he's never once given a legit order in battle. Field. Instead of leading, his days get handed back to him like a trophy. His subordinates spoil him rotten, and everyone from backers to buyers showers him with lavish perks just to lock in juicy military contracts tied to his family's business. And yeah, he's addicted to the status and comfort that comes with a rank he never really earned. He keeps firing off insults, And when mocking Silva finally shows up still breathing, he calls him a perfect example of a corrupt cop. Yet Silva shrugs it off, dry as dust, saying his only real gift is his stubborn refusal to. He lets out a cruel laugh, straight up wishing Silva would have just died in some ditch so he wouldn't have to deal with him. And that total disrespect finally snaps Regulus into shouting back, calling out the commander as he crosses. He snaps back with a sneer, snarling at them to stop wasting time and go train their useless soldiers. And as he rushes to shut them down, he fumbles a document. Then it slips from his hands. Grasp! He snaps off a razor-sharp warning. When a young captain tries to call out the mistake, he growls that they better not touch his belongings with those filthy commoner hands, then whips around and turns too. As he storms off, a crushing silence drops over the group, until the series finally breaks it, saying Silva has definitely matured, and that the Silva from back then would have probably torn that man apart. Those words hit her and boom, memories crash back. Silva as a notorious hooligan, with Ceres already standing right there by his side. Her words made Silva snap to shush her, clearly cringing at his past being dragged out in public, while Regulus just stared in total confusion, blinking and blurting that he couldn't wrap his head around how a man like Wilm ever climbed that high. Their talk gets chopped off when Ceres storms in, way too pissed to even look back, and one run-in with a pig bastard leaves her mood in ruins. So she slams the brakes on their drinks plans and has to run because of a rain check. She shoots off with one last sharp wave, desperate to put as much space as possible between herself and that nasty mess. Not possible. Her departure leaves Silva alone, trapped with nothing but his thoughts as he stares at how the day twisted out of nowhere and decides he has to move too. He shrugs it off and slips away from the group, already blazing toward the next phase in his head. He pauses mid-scheme, eyes locked on the intricate device in his hand, and realizes, thanks to the others, he finally has exactly what he needs to push the next move forward. He slips into a quiet hallway and bam, there she is. A young woman with twin braids stuck in endless household chores. As she sweeps, she snaps her head up, her frustration flaring up, because being nothing more than a housekeeper is driving her insane, just like she called. She storms up to him and blurts out her complaints, begging for a real role in logistics instead of getting treated like a maid, and he calmly lays it out. Their setup can't afford fresh recruits right now, because that sudden surge would scream for attention. He leans in close, tells her this lockdown is temporary, and swears she'll get the freedom she craves. Then blindsides her by confessing she isn't just any opponent, she's his most trusted rival. Seeing her shock, he snaps out of it and tells her right now he's got a special mission lined up for her. Boom. Her eyes light up instantly, all her complaints vanish, and she blurts that she wants details, praying it's more than just hiding the. In the barracks, he makes it clear. Her new job isn't just desk work. She'll be running surveillance, hauling out special equipment to track a high-profile target. He whips out a profile target and slaps down a whole lineup of specialized gadgets on the table, calling them the legendary tools of the trade. But when she clocks that the count is off, he waves it away and tells her not to get stuck on the damn details. Her curiosity spikes, and she blurts out the big question. Who exactly is she supposed to shadow? His stare sharpens as he readies to drop the name. They clock the mark, and right away, he spots the target. Commander Willem Brown. Everyone reels at the sheer nerve of snooping on someone that high up, but he brushes it off, calling the commander a massive obstacle that has to be taken out for the good of their huge goals. He keeps up his icy calculations, convinced that if the commander just disappeared, a way better replacement would step in. While the man's endless greed keeps progress stuck in place, the whole task force is barred from the top gear and missions they deserve, leaving everyone safe except the commander. Even as he assumes this will be a win, his partner can't shake the dread. What if hauling incriminating evidence against a top-ranking official isn't as easy as he claims? He just smirks and likens the commander's corruption to an oil field. The moment they dig even a little, that filthy stuff starts gushing out from every corner, and suddenly the proof is right there for the taking. Effortless. She can't shake the truth. It terrifies her, because she can't wrap her head around how someone morally bankrupt could rise all the way to that kind of military power. And the mere existence of a leader like that feels like a wrong, unsettling glitch in the world she thought she knew. She stops right there, halfway through. She thought she had it figured out, then snapped her focus as she leaned into the spy gadget's specialized lens, staring at the high-tech marvels hiding inside the big city, her wide, curious eyes catching every intricate mechanism and stealing her mind for a breath, right as the weight of what's happening closes in. The gravity of the mission hits like a wave. Seeing her light up, he drills her on whether she truly grasps what each device does, then orders her to use them to dig up the commander's secrets. She snaps a fierce salute, nerves trembling but her excitement winning as she gets ready to leave, and he cuts in with one last stern warning to treat the mission with the "even so, one thing stays crystal clear." When she heads out, his real target doesn't move an inch. Removing that incompetent commander is only the opening move. If she pulls off the job, he'll finally push his bigger plans into the next stage, and his eyes are locked on a future he intends to forge. Silva Pierce stands alone, staring down his plan and praying it lands exactly where it should, while he shoves his worries aside, because sitting in fear won't change a single thing. He strides up to the training ground, where recruits are getting smashed by drills, then barks out a command, watching it all with a sharp, amused authority. Ramafuris and her twin sister drive the drills, and with a razor-sharp voice, they press exhausted man for more. No mercy, no letting up. They push the third Special Task Force's belief in meritocracy. Skill is the only currency that counts, no matter how old you are or how long you've been there. The twins snap into a mocking pose, grinning like they own the world, and stare down the struggling soldiers like they're beneath them. They kept needling that huge recruit until he snarled in frustration, reminding him that those adorable little girls beat him. Their relentless taunts keep coming, calling them weaklings, over and over, while the recruits squint and realize these two aren't just civilians. They're the captain's younger sisters. Natalia of Norfolk storms onto the scene, eyes sharp as she zeroes in on those weird training methods, and the twins crushing dominance. She whips around to Silva, stunned by the bombshell that he's got sisters, and he just smirks, like he expected their skills to be undeniable. She stares ahead with fresh grit, and as the road stretches on, she can't ignore how sharp her own flaws are, and she knows she'll have to face them. She stood frozen in front of her captain, stunned by his brutal takedown of her basic training routine, and when he snarled, "Define your job as vice captain," she launched into her formal list, only for his thunderous rage to cut her off mid-sentence. Level, he bellows that she's still stuck in a novice mindset, and the moment it hits, she freezes, because he's not just insulting her combat skills. He's claiming her real job on the battlefield is to lead like a dancer, to move with purpose. After that jaw-dropping claim, he leans in so close it's almost a threat, eyes burning, and demands she spell out what a dancer truly does when the battlefield turns into pure chaos. She leans on everything she studied and lays it out. Every dancer's job is to carry out a reverent prayer ritual for the gods, pull in natural magic power, and then hand it back to their comrades. He admits she did her homework and even gets the whole idea of blending with nature, but he still doesn't buy how she puts it into practice. He leans in close, eyeing her like she's lying, and his voice oozes pure doubt as he grills her on whether she really understands the divine essence she keeps talking about. When the pressure finally snaps, he sneers at her old attempts and demands to know if she truly thinks the gods will be pleased by those dull, pathetic squat hip motions. Shocked by his bluntness, she can only sit in stunned silence while he gears up to drop the one secret that unlocks martial and spiritual perfection. To make his point hit harder, he snaps into a brutal stance and roars that every move, whether he's swinging a sword or driving a spear, comes down to one thing: the twist of the body. At last his words hit home. She jolts, gasps, and suddenly realizes the power isn't in strength at all. It's in the hips, in that rotation at the very core. She leans in hard as the commander barks it's finally time, demanding they turn the theory into real action. Then he hammers home the secret to the divine dance. Rotate the hips, that core move, and watch the gods smile. She copies his lead, starts moving with shaky confidence, and blurts out a nervous question. Is this right? Then locks onto his instructions and fights to twist her stiff motions into the exact move he showed. He snaps right over her words, seething because her move is nothing but that same stiff squat from earlier, and he snarls at her to add a real twist. No way he'll accept a dull, wooden display that has zero flow. Criticism crashes down even harder as he spits that the gods themselves would find her performance more boring than watching insects mate. Then he practically begs for more energy and passion, his voice climbing higher and higher, burning with desperation as he tries to light a fire under her. She shoves herself harder, even as his shouting rattles her nerves, wondering if this extra heat is exactly what he wants. Yet he's still not satisfied, roaring for even more fire and passion to fuel every single thing she does. He tells her to dump her shyness and chase the secret desires she's been hiding, pointing to himself like, "Look, just let it all fly." She just freezes, eyes wide and mind blank, trying to wrap her head around the idea that you're supposed to act like you're burning with passion while everyone's training. As the session goes on, a crushing wave of embarrassment hits her out of nowhere. When he suggests it, she can't help picturing what it'd feel like to be held by the man she loves. Then her face explodes with a fiery blush. And right as her thoughts spiral, it dawns on her. He's totally clueless that he's the exact same guy living in her head. Sensing her hesitation, he stumbles for a heartbeat, then surges right back, telling her to lean on her imagination if she hasn't lived it yet. He won't accept "I can't" as an answer, pushing her to dig up that spark and visualize it anyway. Mind, he keeps up his non-stop shouting lecture about needing someone else's warmth, blissfully unaware he's tearing her up inside. She can only stare at the floor, crushed by how intense he is, and by how mortifying it's getting for her. At last, she nails the move that hits exactly what he's been chasing, and her mentor lights up with a shot of pure victory, because those divine eyes are finally locking onto her, like, there it is. And you can tell she's found the perfect rhythm in the way she's packing. Fashion. Natalia gets snapped at for every stiff move. Her mentor's voice booms until she loosens her posture and flows like she means it, while she can only mumble a guilty apology, because right in the middle of that brutal set, she finally admits her focus slipped. After she's done, the commander rises in front of the whole squad, and his mere presence slams the room into total silence, pure respect, no questions. Then he snaps his piercing stare onto the exhausted kid nearby and tells him straight up that his suffering isn't even close to done, while Kyle, soaked in sweat and fighting for breath, can barely make sense of the. Then the veteran warrior blurts out a total bombshell. He's declaring they'll jump straight into an immediate mock battle, and the young recruit freezes, eyes wide, stunned beyond belief. Belief grips him. His heart pounds like a war drum against his ribs. His body screams that it's already at the edge, and one more round might be the moment he doesn't get back up. He doesn't even hesitate. The commander bursts forward, his practice weapon snapping through the air as he growls that this brutal drill is also a formal punishment for breaking squad rules. The boy gets slammed face first into the dirt, groaning in pure agony, while his mentor looms over him and snarls that he's not about to hold back, no matter how huge the gap in their skills is. Abilities. With every brutal hit that keeps raining down, the seasoned knight starts tallying the prize. Battling a level 62 opponent will blast the boy with massive experience, even if he gets knocked around. Defeated, now it's crystal clear. He has to cram the recruit to level 30 before the deadline hits, because once the boy grows up, this training method will get brutally inefficient fast. Stronger, the exhausted recruit is crumpled on the ground, barely scraping out a groan as the brutal training weight crushes him. He clenched his teeth, burning with stubborn resolve, and even though exhaustion dragged at his limbs, he refused to slow down, especially now, with the captain pouring so much effort into his growth. Yeah, he wanted more with everything he had, but Silva slammed up a hand to stop him cold. The older man admitted he was a ruthless taskmaster, sure, yet he had zero intention of keeping a one-sided pounding going while they were being watched by a pair of. Right on cue, Mia and Natalia swept onto the training grounds, Mia clutching a tray of freshly made rice balls, and Kyle snapped his eyes up, stunned as his focus got completely ripped apart by their unexpected arrival. At arrival, confusion hit them hard. So Mia, cheeks burning, finally admitted she'd heard they were still training and figured they might be starving. Silva couldn't stop himself and broke into a teasing chuckle like, "Come on, you don't just want to make sure your friend doesn't look all battered and fined." She brushed past the captain's jab, stepped right in and shoved the snacks her way, then asked sweetly if she was interrupting their little training session. Cal just stood there, stunned, like his brain couldn't catch up with what she was doing. Meanwhile, Natalia shifted her focus to Silva and spoke with quiet respect, holding out the last of the food like, "Here, take this. You deserve a share of what's left of." The offering was on the table, and the captain suddenly looked rattled. One bead of sweat slid down his temple as he stared at what they'd brought, while Natalia stayed rock steady, just waiting for him to take the. He hesitated for a beat, then reached out, admitting he'd gladly take the meal, his usual bravado melting as her firm grip pressed in. Resistance. Moments later, Kyle took a bite, his eyes lighting up at the taste, and he immediately praised the food's amazing quality, while Mia's whole face lit with relief as her worry vanished into nothing. Appreciation filled the air. Then the gang sat down to eat, and the talk quickly shifted to how the meal was made. Mia spilled that the filling was a special fish recipe she learned from the vice director, and Silva snapped, "You've always had the gift for cooking." He watches the two of them, a flash of annoyance cutting across his face, and their effortless rapport starts to grind his nerves down until he snaps that because of them, he'll have to tweak the training plan. The captain turns his back and the young man behind him spots his opening. He thinks, "If I can ride this tension and fuse it with what I already know, I might finally get my shot." He grips his practice weapon, steps forward before the session can restart, and calls out to the captain, begging for one more round, just so he can prove himself. He hesitates mid-request, then snaps his gloved hand up, signals a stop, and says he's got to talk to Mia Hawkeye first, leaving her frozen, stammering, and completely thrown. Confused, she barely reacts when he snaps his whole body toward her, his face suddenly solemn. Then he fixes his gloves and with zero warning asks if she'll go on a date with him this coming weekend. Silence slams down like a broken door, and no one knows what to say. Mia's cheeks flare as her eyes blow wide with pure disbelief, and everyone else around her just freezes in stunned shock at the captain's sudden, straight-up proposal. He stands in front of the captain, and you can practically see confusion spill off him as the night presses in, like, what's gotten into everyone? And really, why would the young man suddenly ask for a date with a woman that gorgeous? Does he even need a reason to chase that beauty? The captain keeps hammering his critique, tossing her name into the ring with threats like Vice Captain Natalia and Captain Ceres, because to him, she's nothing but a kid. And with a snarl, he insists there are far better women out there for the young man standing nearby, even if his brutal words are protective. In that twisted way he calls strength. Even with those harsh words hanging in the air, the knight can't deny it. There's a real charm in her timid, earnest way, the kind you hardly ever see. But he's still side-eyeing everything because that boy's sudden, out-of-nowhere proposal feels suspicious, especially since he's never acted like this before. He admits it's her call in the end, but he's not backing down. His interference is the only fix that has to happen, and his glare makes it clear he stepped in only because that young man hasn't taken the initiative yet. A bold new challenge drops into the mix, a match to finally settle everything. The captain dares the kid to a mock battle and says that if he can land even one hit in the next 2 weeks, he'll earn the right to take her out on a date, calling it the ultimate test of his grit. The suggestion slams into the young woman like a lightning bolt. Her eyes go huge as she whips her gaze between the two men. The boy stalls, trying to absorb how brutal this challenge really is, while the captain just smirks, confident, almost mocking, pushing him to take the deal. Deep down, the knight-s convinced the boy's special gift is learning and growing from pain, so he decides to shove him to the brink, testing every ounce of his body and mind, even though it could all end in failure, and everyone else would call his methods downright cruel. Feeling his resolve lock in, she leans in and whispers encouragement, certain he can win. No doubt, not for a second. That spark turns up the captain's competitive heat, and he dares the boy to go all in with everything he's got, no matter what tricks he uses. With a roar that screamed, "I won't back down," the young man slams his approval into the duel terms, standing tall as his spirit ignites, because he knows this fight for her heart is officially underway. The brutal prep kicks off right away, and the first 2 days are pure torture. Non-stop training, crushing lessons, and blow after blow as they drive him straight to the edge, gasping through exhaustion because victory is the only thing he can't give up. As the 3rd day finally hits, he grits through the brutal training again, his body getting battered by the non-stop beating. By the 4th day, the fight only gets nastier. Regulus and his crew fling the young man and his companion around like they're weightless ragdolls, sneering at their crushing weakness and stalled progress. He crumpled into the dirt, wheezing like he's about to die, and Regulus just stared at him with pure contempt as the captain demanded, "Are you ready to quit?" But the warrior clung to his pride and swore he could push on, even with his body screaming otherwise. Teeth clenched with pure frustration, he hears Regulus say nothing as the words hit like a hammer. With only 10 days left, landing even one solid blow is basically impossible. While the captain got lost daydreaming about a lavish date with Mia, glam dinners, sweet romance, the whole show, the young trainee stayed locked on one mission and promised to beat the odds no matter what. Regulus watches his student like a hawk, and even though the kid's stamina is in absolute shambles, his grit inside is genuinely frightening. The captain finally clocks it. Those standard training drills have hit a wall, and he knows the only way the boy truly grows is by throwing him into a real battlefield, where life and death decide everything, even if it means standing face to face with monstrous horrors. Staring at the jagged, frozen peaks ahead, the commander decides the only path forward is to toss his subordinate straight into a literal living hell. With a smug grin, he snaps the wager back into place, telling the kid he's got exactly 2 weeks, just one clean hit, and the victory is his. Close by, Mia finally clicks. She stares at Regulus like, "Wait, I'm actually required to go on this date." And Regulus answers with a cold, absolute certainty. He watches the young man grind himself to the edge of exhaustion, stuck on one question: where does that insane drive come from? Kyle's thoughts spin in chaos, drowning in self-doubt as he wonders why he keeps pushing when the distance between him and the captain feels impossible. He remembers the captain's smooth charm and hard-earned experience, and it hits him. He's just a shadow next to that. Then his mind yanks him back 10 years, to the day it all started. In a twisted flashback, a pack of cruel kids traps a young girl, spits vile insults, and snarls for the half-elf to vanish from their sight. Seeing the injustice, the young boy blurts out, "Stop," his eyes blazing, half terrified, half furious. As the bullies bolt away, the young girl stays pinned to the ground, tears pouring down her cheeks, while the boy lunges forward, offering his hand to comfort her. With a fierce grin, he tells her she has nothing to fear, then swears, right there and then, that he'll stand between her and danger from this day onward. Right back in the present, he wipes the sweat off his brow, and a bitter smile creeps in as he realizes, yeah, his strength now is pathetic compared to the oath he swore as a kid. He lunges into a mock fight, every movement razor-sharp, but it still doesn't carry the smooth, refined power his mentor has. He snarls through the strain, muscles straining for every last bit of strength. Strike, then the simulated fight hits like a truck, and he gets flung backward, stomach dropping as he realizes that even this fake version of his rival is too brutal to survive. He's bent over, panting, crushed by the weight of his own inadequacy as he finally admits it. Because right now he's got zero chance. Suddenly, a dark thought digs into his mind, pure, desperate hunger for power. So he stares wide-eyed and shakes as he realizes he has to beat the captain at any cost. Right out of nowhere, a dark-hooded stranger wearing a white mask blocks his path and asks if he's starving for power to crush his rival, only to realize the mystery act is terrible, because the hood in disguise can't hide who it really is. The captain's younger sister. Even after she tries to play it cool, slipping into the shadows like a ghost, he's not buying it for a second. He keeps pressing, asking who she really is while she stumbles through her big dramatic performance. He points it out without softness. Her voice and build can't be mistaken, but she digs in her heels and swears he's wrong, fighting to keep the whole act going. Life, sick of his stubborn persistence and trapped in her own failing act, finally snaps. She lets out a furious scream as her perfectly built persona comes apart. Now that everything's out in the open, Akatsuki snaps and says he wrecked the vibe she fought so hard to build, then even admits he borrowed Itsuki's costume. But instead of dwelling on the drama, he's laser-focused on his training, demanding to know what she needs so he can get back to his routine. She scoffs at his hard work, swatting his intense practice like it's just clumsy dancing, then mocks his desperate hunger for strength as nothing but a boy thing. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she snaps a command for him to follow, swearing she'll show him something worth the trouble. So even though he hesitates, he gives in and tags along, curiosity winning before he can stop it. They soon wind up in a hidden nook behind a building, and an ugly chill hits him. Because why in the world would she drag him somewhere so private and cut off from everyone? Her voice hardens into a grim warning, telling him that what's coming next is nothing but brutal suffering, a living hell meant to test every last inch of his body. Right in front of them, all limits shatter. Then a twisting vortex of dark energy erupts, and he panics, convinced it's a deadly rift. But she stays cool and explains. It's a portal, way more advanced and tightly controlled than that brutal rift back then. She tells him the swirling vortex is a jaw-dropping feat of spatial transfer tech, built on the same rules that power rifts. So when he scoffs at magic, she slams the brakes on his doubts and demands to know if he truly wants strength, or if he's just bluffing. She clocks his confusion, lets out a frustrated sigh, calls him dense to his face, then snaps that a hero this slow-brained can't possibly be the one meant to save their world, while he just stammers, totally blindsided by her brutal honesty. A sly, almost predatory grin flashes across her face as she tells him some lessons can only be lived, not studied. Then she swears that whatever waits beyond will forge growth no amount of old-school training ever could, and she pushes him to see it with his own eyes. Without a single warning, she hurls a massive, fully packed rucksack at him, and he barely manages to snatch it. He grunts as the sudden weight slams into his arms, already panicking, because he has no idea what he's even supposed to do with it. Kyle protests that the pack is way too huge for bare minimum supplies, but she barrels right past his complaints, then shoves him hard, sending him stumbling toward the portal's shimmering event horizon and snapping. Don't sweat the details. He darts into the swirling dark with a sharp, startled cry, and suddenly she's left alone in that hushed room, staring as the portal steadies, while she mutters that cryptic thought about how he pushes his little sister too hard, the kind of secret that hits close to home between them. Shared burden. As the change hits, a memory slams into his mind, an intense, sharp-eyed young man with a burning stare, taunting his older brother with challenge and respect. Then the vision explodes into shards as he smashes straight into a bank of freezing powder, the slam stealing his breath and leaving him choking in a harsh, unknown cold. Kyle shudders as he hauls himself upright in a dead-still, snow-choked wilderness. And just like that, 1 second he's in the training hall, the next the world drops to sub-zero, freezing him to the bone as the cold screams into his bones. His breath catches hard as a hulking dark shape climbs out of the snow nearby, and a deep growl rolls through the air like thunder as terror slams in. He isn't alone in this. Rosenhell. He freezes with wide eyes, breath catching in the biting cold, and when the truth finally hits him face to face, he can't even get a word out. Speechless, he stares out over an endless sea of snow and ice. No one around, not a soul in sight. Just an unfamiliar mountain range towering over him, with only his rucksack, as he can't figure out why he's been dropped here. William Brown's face twists with rage as he slams a newspaper onto the table, his booming voice tearing through the room, and he barks that he wants answers. Why in the world was he summoned here, staring down his subordinate like he's ready to explode? His fury bursts from the morning headlines, shouting about sexual harassment by top officers and rot deep in the military's highest command, while the article lays it all out. Special favors handed to favored contractors in return for lavish entertainment, and it makes the leadership look absolutely guilty. He snaps his trembling gaze to Silva Pierce, sweating buckets as he demands, who in the world could be spreading such fake, baseless lies? Silva stays stone calm, face unreadable, while he watches the commander fall apart. The young knight keeps a stone calm face, but inside his mind is sprinting through the chaos, because he knows in this deadly game of power, ideas and secrets are the sharpest blades he's got. This chaos wasn't random at all. Earlier, he'd reached straight to the syndicate's mastermind to set the leak in motion, making sure every damning detail landed in the press, twisting the whole story to his advantage and crushing his rivals in the process. Back in the present, the commander's denial hits a boiling peak as he roars that every word in those papers is a lie, then snaps and hammers his subordinate, calling him a useless mutt and screaming for the accusations to stop. Later, he stands alone by the window, letting the outside world blur while he savors that hard-earned win. Everything is playing out exactly as he planned, and he can practically feel Vohm's grip finally starting to unravel, 1 second at a time. While the city churned with ruthless political schemes, other players sprinted in a totally different direction, and right as those scandals erupted, Ka was yanked away to the brutal, unforgiving snowy mountains. Meanwhile, the braided-haired young woman gets dragged straight into the mess of their plans, and her frustration keeps spiking, because she finally clocks the truth. She's been used like a pawn in some bigger game, and no matter how hard she pushes, her mission keeps delivering nothing real. She stood there by herself, staring into the chaos of scandals that had just swallowed the commander, press lights blazing, newspapers screaming about corruption, and she knew she wouldn't be the only one down there clawing for the truth. Through her monocular, she saw it clear as day. This wasn't just an investigation. It was a real-life showdown to prove who's the best. The golden chance finally landed in her hands, and she'd be damned if she let herself be the one sent packing for failing. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the commander step into a fancy, members-only bar, guarded so heavily it felt like a fortress. Then the way the meeting played out lit up every alarm in her gut, because she knew something dirty was going down behind those closed doors. The thought of Silva's approval made her cheeks burn, and she let out a little giggle as she set up her recording gear. Because if she could snag proof of this meeting, her big brother would be blown away. She slipped into the building like a shadow, hunting for a better view, and found the place in total chaos. Then she hissed a hard command to her partner. Guard the door and don't let anyone tail us. Right in the middle of the wrecked room, the rotten floorboards snapped under her, and she yelped in shock as she stumbled and lost her footing. With a violent crack, the wood shattered into splinters. She tore through the floor, debris and dust exploding down as she dropped into the pitch-black world below. Heart pounding like a drum, she peeked out from the lower level's shadows, praying the deafening thud of her fall hadn't carried in the dead silence. Upstairs, the chaos erupted loud enough that nearby workers sprinted over to see what was going on, only to find rubble and a gaping hole in the floor, staring in confusion at the missing culprit who'd vanished without a trace. She slipped into the shadows just in time, holding her breath as danger passed, then locked in. Because now she had to track her target down and end this investigation, no matter what stood in her way. She huddles in the darkness, her heart pounding like a drum as she slips past detection by the workers above. Below her, Willem Brown and his crew stand close by, and just seeing him confirms her worst suspicions. This is no ordinary deal. Something illicit is happening. She clings to pure determination, stealing that courage for herself, and swears she'll return with the evidence her brother needs to tear the truth wide open. But the distance swallows every word, and she snarls in frustration because that crucial conversation stays just beyond her reach. Suddenly, crack! The floor rips open with a deafening blast, and she tumbles headfirst through a choking cloud of dust and debris into the room below. The dust finally drifts away, and the commander with his aide whips around toward the commotion, straight onto the intruder. She gets hit with the full weight of her situation, and panic detonates, her thoughts sprinting for a way out while she quietly begs for help. Right before she can even blink, her captor snatches her up and slams her against the freezing stone, muffling her cries like they don't matter. William Brown looms over her, snarling like a storm cloud, and demands to know who put her here. He yanks her chin up roughly, his grip bruising her as he roars for an answer, and he won't accept that she did this by herself. Alone, he towers over her and shuts down her story that she acted by herself. Then he demands the device they found earlier, his eyes flashing with a wicked, greedy curiosity. With a sharp crack, the commander smashes the tiny cylinder in his grip, brushing off her desperate plea that she built it herself. Then he sneers, calling it impossible that some lowly villager could have made something like that. He snaps his gaze to his men, and the big brute rages out orders to ready the room for something harsher, grumbling that her stubborn refusal has them out of options. If talking won't work, then he'll make her feel it. A chilling lineup of metal instruments waits on a nearby table, and every single tool is built for a specific, brutal kind of pain. He snatches a heavy, ridged weapon, hefting it in his hand as he closes in on the shaking girl. Her eyes flare with raw terror as the truth finally crashes down on her. The commander presses that cold metal against her skin, smiling as she involuntarily flinches, like he's genuinely enjoying it, teasing that this is exactly how their fun is going to start. Before he starts, he snaps the guards away, orders them to stand watch outside, and makes it clear no witnesses get to see the brutality he's about to unleash. He folds in silence. Then, alone with his captive, his face twists into pure sadistic glee, and he gives her one final chance to dodge the agony ahead by revealing who sent her. Even with tears streaming down her face and pure terror shaking her tiny body, she digs up one last spark of defiance. She screams her refusal, swears she'll never betray her secrets, and that only drives the commander's dark. Scowling from the shadows, he spots how fast this turns ugly, and he realizes stealth is done for. So he tightens his grip and steps in, because this has finally hit the point where he can't stay a bystander anymore. Bystander, and then he leans in, his commander's voice dripping with pure malice. Willem Brown admits the truth doesn't matter to him, only the sick pleasure he gets from tormenting a naive girl. So he pushes her to scream all she wants since no one outside will ever hear. Here, the second the torture kicks off, her screams tear through the room exactly like the commander wanted. He soaks it in, relishing every cry, and taunts her, claiming he can hear her even when she's. With searing pain and that brutal, crushing shame hanging over her, Roma refuses to break. She keeps her lips sealed, clinging to one fiery promise. Her big bro will drag this monster into justice, and she won't let her tormentor ever enjoy the satisfaction of taking her down. Not even a. And right in the middle of her suffering, a long-lost memory claws its way back. One day, a woman told her that when real hardship finally crushed her, she'd need a specific chant to survive. Remember, those words echo back like a promise, certain to bring help the moment she hits her darkest hour. Back in the dungeon's freezing reality, she starts whispering the names of everyone she can't lose, Mia, Rafina, and Keel, turning their names into a desperate lifeline. Prayer. Her captor isn't moved, Those murmurs mean nothing to him, and his annoyance just grows. Wilm Brown sneers at her stubborn fight, muttering how long she can keep this up before her spirit finally breaks. His arrogance gets instantly smashed by a gut-punch realization. 1 second he's smug, the next pure shock hits his face as something totally unexpected starts unfolding right in front of him. Eyes widen. Then a brutal explosion tears through the chamber, blasting the commander backward as stone and dust rain down. He yells in pure disbelief, and his grip on everything slips away. When the debris finally settles, his eyes go wide with pure terror, because the predator has suddenly flipped to become the prey in the wake of that mysterious intervention. He recoils in shock, face twisting with pure confusion as he snaps, "What is happening?" And all around him, his guards are already down, neutralized, slumped lifeless on the cold. He freezes in horror as thick plumes of smoke roar through the busted entrance, swallowing the figure behind the sudden blast. Intrusion. The stranger crawls out of the haze, dropping a polite apology for the late-night disturbance, and Roma lifts her gaze, shocked, stunned like her thoughts just froze mid-flight. He stands tall and declares, loud and proud, that he's from the Holy Empire of Eternia's 3rd Special Operations Unit, snuffing out the commander's arrogance in an instant and freezing the room in cold, paralyzing terror. The warrior drops his name, Silva Pierce, and just like that, his sheer authority turns the dungeon from drowning despair into the air-thick dread of an oncoming verdict. He stared down with icy contempt, sneering that even a pig would make better choices than the man shaking in front of him. Then he barked for the commander to stare at his own reflection and face the truth. He was completely defeated. He wouldn't back down, so he finally spilled the whole legal trap, telling them that sure, the state usually gets the power to subdue violent resistors, but the person who delivers the summons gets temporary authority to make the arrest. He didn't just claim authority. He swore that in the mind's own courtroom, his testimony would stand as ironclad proof, and then ordered the man to stay silent and submit to the authorized military investigation. He mocked the man's predictable cravings, calling out his obsession with beautiful women, and zeroing in on that one red-haired girl, while the commander's stomach dropped, his thoughts scrambling over how anyone could have found his secret basement or even figured out where he was hiding. Leaning in, he hissed that the commander would want his prize, right there, in his own hands, crushing what little was left in the already shattered man. When she asked in panic how he could possibly know all that, he flashed a chilling smile and swore he knew it all, because the answers had followed him from a past life. Shaking with horror at this unreal truth, the commander burst into a terrified scream for help, his voice cracking as he shouted a huge reward for anyone willing to kill the man right in front of him. As his desperate pleas echoed through the courtyard, he spun around and bolted, while his enemy just stood frozen in the moonlight. Moments later, the fleeing man slammed to a stop, wheezing and cursing his bad luck. Then a calm voice drifted from behind him, telling him every guard was already handled and they were all upstairs, sound asleep. That realization slammed into him like a punch. His eyes snapped wide with pure fear as he turned back and realized that man seemed to know every move he'd ever made. He scrambles for a way out, voice trembling, begging Silva to team up instead of letting this showdown drag on. Desperate to save himself, the commander starts talking in circles, screaming that his fall would unleash chaos, then swears the authorities will only ever give him a simple commendation before the night is over. He even throws out the wildest deal, unfathomable riches, top-tier status, and any woman the young man wants. But the night just won't budge, shutting it down with a calm, icy refusal. Silver laughs it off. Half the world is the kind of empty cliché he refuses to play along with, and that offer isn't even worth thinking about. That refusal hits like a punch. The commander reels backward, his bravado shattering as he crumples into a pathetic heap on the floor. With the shattered man behind him, the knight snaps his attention to Roma. Her eyes flood with tears as she stares at the man she swears is her brother. Rage detonates after the dismissal. He surges forward in a murderous roar, snarling that his opponent is nothing but a stray dog. A brutal, bone-crushing hit slams into him, snapping his head back like a whip. Still reeling from the hit, the man struggles to get his opponent's name out, half swallowed by pure pain. With one final, crushing strike right to the commander's groin, his protests die instantly, once and for all. In the end, he crumpled on the stone floor, and defeat finally slammed into him for real. While above, the blonde knight and the young operative traded excited words about how clean their infiltration was. The girl, mask finally off, declared that every piece of incriminating evidence was locked down, and the secret passageways to the basement were secured. The commander's fall screamed of her raw talent, and Silva Pierce didn't waste a second before singing her praises. He ruffled her head and told her she could pull off anything she set her sights on. She lit up instantly, brushing off the whole challenge like it was nothing at all. Even after her win, she still couldn't stop herself. She grumbled about how her first day landed with her stuck dealing with someone filthy. Then her eyes snapped to the real problem. She yanked his arm and begged for a fresh pair of shoes to replace the ones ruined in the mess. He didn't buy it. He kept staring at the forces, like he was figuring out the angles and pressure instead of the damage. While the others argued, Natalia grabbed control of the prisoner, then drove a sharp kick into his side and barked that disgraced commander to move, giving him zero sympathy for the man who once commanded everything. They hauled him off as a miserable shadow, stripped of dignity and left in nothing but his bare shirt. Silva watched the procession roll out, eyes thoughtful and sharp, thinking that if the other soldiers caught wind of this bizarre treatment, jealousy might spark. But he checked himself, reminding his own mind that the guy was still just a suspect for now, and rough hands weren't on the menu yet. With the immediate threat crushed and the prisoner locked down, he snapped his focus to every last loose end, his eyes sharpening as if to say, "All right, the real delicate part of this night is still coming." He closed in on the young woman who'd sold the ruse so perfectly, and as the adrenaline crashed, Roma started trembling, her eyes spilling tears, while he asked if she was okay. She could only gasp out that she was anything but, because she'd been genuinely terrified. Fear still clawing at her, she suddenly lunged forward and pressed her face into his chest, clinging tight as her cries erupted louder and louder, until the brave villager mask she wore finally snapped in front of the real danger she'd survived. He froze for a heartbeat, totally blindsided by the sudden wave of emotion, then softened his posture and gently laid his hand on her head, telling her to just let it all out and cry as much as she needed. Soon her sobs drained into a quiet little sniffle. Roma lifted her eyes to him, relief and anger tangled together, snapping that he'd planned her capture from the start, like that made him cruel. He didn't flinch at the charge. He just closed the distance and asked if she was finally calm enough to talk. She talks on, and Silva finally admits she's right, his eyes sliding upward as he confesses the part he played in the deception. He narrows his focus on his own plan, cold as ice, replaying every move he made, using what he knew about the world to make sure Roma ends up in the hands of the captors, because all of it was aimed at getting the evidence he needed from the base. He turns back to her with a heavy heart, and the captain rushes in with a real apology, admitting that it was him who betrayed the trust of the one person who believed in him most. The young woman stayed torn, her face flashing hurt and longing as she admitted it. She was thrilled to be trusted, but the truth that she was nothing more than bait crushed the joy right out of her. He tries to make it right the only way he can, offering her any amount of gold she wants, even promising to grant whatever wish she blurts out. Instead of chasing riches, she leans in and murmurs a weird request, begging him to call her his best underling. So confused, he finally exhales and gives in, leaving her thrilled and waiting for what comes next. Light spilled over the scene, and as they started to drift away from the investigation, something calm and heavy clicked into place between them, like the tension from before was about to snap into silence. He pauses, and with that raw, sudden sincerity in his voice, he tells her, straight from the heart, how grateful he is that their paths collided that day, because mission success would have been impossible without. Her eyes shimmer, and a radiant, tear-streaked smile breaks across her face. Every last ounce of resentment evaporates the moment she calls him a hero and pours out her gratitude for what they, under the quiet night sky, they finally meet, two figures standing shoulder to shoulder outside the grand estate, and the bond between the knight and his unlikely companion is forged anew after. With the storm finally easing, she had sunk into her new role, and after 10 long days, the heat of the investigation into Willem Brown started to cool down. Silva sat at his desk buried under stacks of paperwork, and he was drowning in reports, the only sound in the room the quiet scratch of his pen as he wrote down every detail. While he was buried in his reports, a quiet knock suddenly cracked the silence. "Come in," he said, and Mia Hawkeye slid into the room. Tension sat on her shoulders like a weight, and with a shaky apology for interrupting, she confessed there was something urgent, something she couldn't ignore. He leaned in and listened as she confessed her growing dread over Kyle's whereabouts. Because sure, he was only supposed to be gone a few days. Yet 10 full days had passed with not a single word. When she finally asked if he was even okay, a brutal realization slammed into Silva's exhaustion, her eyes snapping wide at the huge oversight she'd missed. The weight of his mistake pinned him down, slumped in his seat like a man who'd lost to his own negligence. And with a heavy sigh, he only managed one blunt confession. In the chaos of the investigation, he'd totally forgotten the young man was back.